History's most notorious act of treachery wasn't performed by a soldier, a ruler, or even a male figure. A woman executed it, and her identity has been intertwined with cunning and betrayal for more than 3 millennia. Delilah didn't simply overcome Samson. She destroyed him so thoroughly that his tale transformed into a cautionary message passed down through countless generations. Here's the part that escapes most people's awareness. There exist startling revelations about Delilah's actual motivations and tactics that will fundamentally alter your perception of this age-old narrative of romance, deception, and complete annihilation. Before we proceed, though, for those who are newcomers to this channel, think about tapping that like button and subscribing if you haven't done so yet. Your engagement allows us to keep creating additional content designed to help you relax or discover something fascinating. Additionally, share with us your current location and the time where you are. We're constructing a worldwide community right here, enabling you to encounter and bond with others who share similar interests from every corner of the globe. So, with no additional delay, shall we dive into today's narrative? Shadows envelop the chamber like a funeral cloth. Moonlight alone pierces the window opening, throwing silver illumination onto the slumbering giant's features. Samson's breathing runs deep and rhythmic. His torso expands and contracts with the cadence of absolute faith. Delilah positions herself next to him, her hands shaking as they hang suspended above the bronze cutting shears. The metal captures the illumination, frigid and keen. Her gaze flicks toward the window opening, then returns to his expression, serene, oblivious, defenseless. Hidden within the darkness, Philistine warriors remain motionless. Their protective gear produces barely audible sounds as they adjust their stance. 5 regional rulers have compensated her handsomely for this precise moment. 1,100 silver pieces from each ruler, greater riches than the majority witness across an entire existence. She extends her hand toward a section of his hair, dark, colored, dense, never subjected to any blade, the origin of his extraordinary power, the mystery he ultimately revealed following months of her patient questioning. Her fingers encircle the strands, and she raises the shears upward. A single cut, followed by another. Hair descends soundlessly onto the floor like leaves in autumn. Each snip removes years of heavenly protection. The sacred agreement between the celestial realm and the earthly world dissolves with every strand removed. His respiration alters, more shallow now, commonplace. The extraordinary ability that previously enabled him to rip apart lions using nothing but his bare hands drains away into the darkness. She murmurs his name softly, testing his state. He shifts slightly but doesn't awaken. The Philistine soldiers inch forward. Their commanding officer signals to Delilah. She cries out, her voice slicing through the quiet like a weapon. "Samson, the Philistines have come for you!" He awakens abruptly, his muscles preparing for combat. Yet when he strains against his restraints, nothing occurs. The bindings hold firm. His power has vanished. Bewilderment washes across his features as the reality becomes clear. The woman he cherished has traded him for silver currency. The mighty one has collapsed. The legend concludes not with a thunderous sound, but with a murmur of betrayal. Shadows consume the scene. Only reverberations linger. The era of judges, a territory without monarchs. Envision a territory suspended between disorder and expectation. Ancient Israel extends across mountainous regions and lowlands. 12 tribes dispersed like seeds cast upon rocky terrain. No royal crown adorns any skull. No ruling seat commands from any palace, only vacancy where authority ought to exist. The population drifts through their existence like livestock without a herder. Whenever difficulty arrives, they appeal to the heavens. Whenever tranquility comes back, they disregard their supplications. This pattern revolves continuously, one generation following another. Invaders descend from the elevated lands whenever they desire. Midianites, Moabites, Ammonites. Adversaries encircle like carrion birds. They plunder harvests, incinerate settlements, capture slaves. The Israelites conceal themselves in caverns and protected fortifications, awaiting the tempests to subside. Yet occasionally, heaven dispatches assistance. A judge emerges from among the population. Not a monarch commanding armies, rather an average individual touched by heavenly ability. Deborah, the female prophet, Gideon, the agricultural worker, Jephthah, the rejected one. Each individual unique, yet all summoned to rescue their population from subjugation. These judges never maintain authority for extended periods. They materialize when required, defeat their adversaries, then retreat back into legendary status. The population rejoices, then gradually strays from the regulations that connect them to their deity. Before long, fresh adversaries materialize. The pattern recommences. Settlements remain modest and separated. Commercial pathways turn perilous. Education diminishes as mere survival becomes the priority. The magnificent commitments made to Abraham and Moses appear like remote fantasies. Young males mature hearing narratives of previous supernatural events, the division of the waters, the collapse of Jericho's barriers. Yet those accounts seem like children's tales. Presently, their contemporary existence is more straightforward and more severe. Cultivate the ground, defend your household, wish for improved circumstances. The religious officials continue presenting offerings, yet the Ark of the Covenant remains in obscurity. The Holy Tent relocates from location to location, accompanying the tribes during their wanderings. Even the Levites face challenges maintaining their obligations when warfare disrupts everything. Within this fractured reality, individuals make concessions. They form marriages with adjacent tribes despite the cautions. They embrace foreign traditions, revere unfamiliar deities. The distinctions between Israel and its adversaries become unclear. Still, expectation endures. Mothers continue relating to their offspring about the sacred agreement. Fathers continue circumcising their male children. The devoted continue assembling for celebrations and observances. The commitment stays vital, even within the shadows. This represents the reality that molds Samson's narrative. A location where supernatural events seem essential because mortal power proves insufficient, where a solitary individual touched by the divine can transform everything, where the distinction between champion and catastrophe runs as delicate as a single hair. The platform is arranged for something remarkable. The population requires a rescuer. Their adversaries strengthen with each passing day. And within the elevated lands of Dan, a woman anticipates a supernatural event that will shake the ground. Introducing the Philistines, rulers of the maritime population. They arrived from beyond the Mediterranean waters, navigating in vessels with arched fronts and decorated fabric sails. Fighters from remote island territories motivated by desire for fresh territories. Historical records would identify them as the sea populations. Yet to the Israelites, they were merely the Philistines. Their appearance transformed everything. Unlike the wandering raiders who attacked and retreated, these arrivals intended to remain. They constructed urban centers along the shoreline, each one a stronghold of stone and determination. Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, Gath, 5 fortified locations that would project shadows across the territory for many centuries. The Philistines transported more than weapons and protective shields. They possessed the knowledge of iron metallurgy, while the Israelites continued battling with bronze implements. Their adversaries manufactured superior blades in concealed workshops. The noise of metal being hammered resonated from their urban centers continuously. Each urban center answered to a ruler, yet the 5 rulers cooperated like digits on a hand. They distributed resources, synchronized assaults, and separated conquered lands. This cooperation rendered them nearly impossible to defeat against the dispersed tribes of Israel. Their deity, Dagon, governed from temples of sculpted stone. Half human, half aquatic creature, he guaranteed supremacy over both terrain and waters. Religious officials presented sacrificial offerings, while the population celebrated triumphs. Religious practice and military conflict merged into one motivating power. The Philistine military forces were experts. They practiced ceaselessly, preserved their gear, and adhered to rigorous order. Their war vehicles thundered across conflict zones. Their archers launched arrows with fatal accuracy. Their foot soldiers progressed in flawless arrangement, yet they presented more than merely domination. Philistine traders transported unusual merchandise from remote territories. Their skilled workers fabricated exquisite pottery and ornaments. Their agricultural workers introduced novel crops and methods. Certain Israelites started perceiving them as neighboring communities rather than adversaries. This cultural blending disturbed the faithful. Intermarriage turned commonplace. Young Israelites acquired Philistine traditions, communicated in their tongue, embraced their fashions. The unique character of the divine chosen population started to become vague. The Philistines formed commercial pathways that linked the Mediterranean to the arid lands. Trading groups transported merchandise between Egypt and Mesopotamia, traversing through Philistine lands. Revenue from this commerce filled their financial reserves and supported their military forces. They constructed no provisional encampments. Every Philistine establishment was designed for permanence. Stone dwellings, paved thoroughfares, water drainage arrangements, commercial centers. These represented the foundations of a fresh structure. They planned to govern this territory eternally. Their territorial growth proceeded gradually, yet persistently. Settlement by settlement, lowland by lowland. They broadened their dominance. They required payment from those they couldn't conquer, establishing a system of subordinate communities. The Israelite response proved fragmented and frantic. Individual tribes battled in isolation, typically losing. The Philistines appeared impossible to stop, their iron implements cutting through bronze like parchment. Terror descended over the territory like early mist. Still, something within the Philistines' achievement cultivated excessive pride. They started accepting their own messaging. Their deities appeared more powerful than Israel's God. Their society seemed superior to the dispersed tribes. Their triumph felt certain. This pride would demonstrate expensive. Israel's God had not forsaken his population. He was arranging a response that would shake the Philistine rulers to their cause. A child was arriving who would make them dread the darkness. Arrival of a Nazirite, the child forbidden from razors. Within the mountainous region of Dan, a woman, identified as Manoah's wife, existed with silent hopelessness. Years of matrimony had elapsed without offspring. Within her society, this signified more than individual sorrow. It implied heavenly displeasure, a symbol of disgrace that accompanied her through every moment. She transported water from the well, while other women conversed about their sons. She arranged meals for two, while neighboring families fed expanding households. She created fabric, while hearing lullabies floating through window openings. The void expanded more oppressive with each changing season. Manoah cherished her entirely, yet even his compassion couldn't occupy the emptiness. Acquaintances presented guidance, treatments, prayers. Nothing produced results. The womb stayed sealed. The dwelling stayed silent. The future stayed ambiguous. Then, one midday, while she labored independently in the agricultural land, an unfamiliar figure materialized. Not approaching along the pathway like typical visitors, rather simply present, as if the ground itself had formed him from sunbeams and darkness. His existence caused the atmosphere to waver with potential. "You are, without fertility and childless," he stated, his voice bearing the force of complete reality. "Yet you shall become pregnant and deliver a male child." The declaration struck her like a lightning bolt. She abandoned her labor, staring at this enigmatic figure. His physical form was average yet remarkable, mortal yet supernatural. When she attempted to concentrate on his facial features, it appeared to transform like fire. "You must refrain from wine or potent beverages," he proceeded. "Consume nothing considered impure. The child you shall bear will be a Nazirite from his arrival. No cutting blade shall contact his skull, for he shall commence delivering Israel from the Philistines." Before she could answer, he disappeared, not departing gradually or diminishing slowly, rather gone like an extinguished flame. She remained isolated in the agricultural land, questioning if she had imagined the meeting. She rushed homeward to inform Manoah, declarations tumbling over one another in enthusiasm. Her spouse listened with increasing astonishment, then collapsed to his knees in supplication. If this proved accurate, if the divine truly intended to favor them, they required comprehension of their obligations. The unfamiliar figure returned when Manoah requested additional guidance. This occasion, both spouse and wife observed the supernatural event. The visitor repeated his directives, then revealed his genuine character. When they presented a sacrificial offering, he rose to the celestial realm within the fire. Manoah understood they had encountered a heavenly messenger. Terror seized him, yet his wife demonstrated greater understanding. If the divine intended to eliminate them, she concluded, he wouldn't have committed to them a son. The visit signified favor, not condemnation. Months elapsed. Her physical form altered as fresh life developed internally. Neighboring residents murmured about the impossible pregnancy. Yet, she and Manoah maintained the heavenly messenger's declarations private. This child would be exceptional, distinguished from a rival for a heavenly intention. She adhered to every directive meticulously. No wine contacted her mouth. She prevented unclean nourishments. She arranged herself to nurture a Nazirite, comprehending that his hair would never be severed. His diet would be limited. His existence would be devoted to the divine. The delivery arrived with characteristic pain, yet supernatural expectation. A male child, precisely as committed. They identified him Samson, signifying little son. He would mature to radiate like a burning celestial body, transporting illumination to his population's shadows. From his initial breath, the child proved unique. More powerful than typical infants, more vigilant, more energetic. The divine spirit moved upon him even during early childhood. Neighboring residents who arrived sensed something remarkable about the youth. Manoah and his wife nurtured him meticulously, instructing him the regulations of his Nazirite commitment. No cutting blade for his hair, no wine for his consumption, no interaction with deceased bodies. These limitations identified him as sacred, distinguished for the divine's intentions. The youth matured rapidly, his power escalating beyond typical boundaries. By teenage years, he could raise stones that tested mature males. Untamed creatures retreated from his existence. The Philistines who governed the region started noticing the unusual young male from Dan. Young Samson, power without understanding. Samson's adolescent years burst with ability and intensity. His physical form grew elevated and wide, muscles undulating beneath sun-bronzed skin. His hair flowed downward along his back like a wild mane, never contacted by blade or flame. Yet while his power reached supernatural levels, his understanding remained painfully average. The initial indicators materialized during youthful activities. Physical contests concluded too rapidly. Running competitions transformed into solitary triumphs. Other youths learned to prevent challenges they couldn't succeed in. Samson discovered himself progressively separated, his abilities transforming into obstacles rather than connections. His parents observed with increasing worry. They had nurtured him meticulously, instructing him the regulations and traditions of his population. Yet, adolescent defiance extended deeper than parental direction. Samson started testing limits to challenge against the limitations that controlled his existence. One summer afternoon, while assisting his father in the agricultural fields, Samson grew irritated with a resistant ox. The creature declined to advance, despite prodding and pulling. In a moment of frustration, the young male grasped the animal and raised it completely off the terrain. The ox's eyes expanded with horror before Samson positioned it downward gently. Accounts of such occurrences circulated through the settlements. Some murmured about heavenly favor, others muttered about demonic influence. Parents cautioned their offspring to maintain distance from the unusual youth from Dan. Samson sensed the burden of their gazes wherever he traveled. His social awkwardness intensified as his standing circulated. Discussions ceased when he neared. Invitations halted arriving. Young women giggled anxiously when he attempted communicating with them. The very power that should have established him as a leader instead rendered him an outsider. Solitude generated frustration, and frustration generated carelessness. Samson started initiating conflicts with Philistine military personnel who monitored the territory. These encounters never persisted long. A casual strike would propel armed fighters airborne. Before long, complete patrols learned to prevent the pathways near his settlement. His parents appealed with him to regulate his disposition. The Philistines governed this territory, they reminded him. Attracting their focus would transport difficulty to everyone. Yet Samson felt invulnerable, beyond reach. What could mere mortals accomplish to someone favored by the divine? The mischief commenced modestly, obstructing pathways with massive stones, demolishing military shelters, liberating captives from Philistine detention facilities. Each occurrence intensified his standing and their fury. The regional rulers started presenting compensation for details about the enigmatic saboteur. Samson discovered he appreciated the focus, even when it proved negative, superior to be feared than disregarded. His actions grew more daring, his objectives more substantial. He started perceiving himself as a solitary resistance force, a heavenly tool of fairness. Yet, fairness combined with vengeance generates a perilous mixture. Samson's actions frequently harmed innocent individuals along with his planned objectives. Traders lost merchandise when he interrupted commercial groups. Agricultural workers suffered when he demolished Philistine installations near their lands. His parents aged swiftly during this interval. The pressure of nurturing such an unstable child extracted its cost. They supplicated ceaselessly for understanding, for protection, for their son to discover his genuine intention. Yet Samson appeared determined to squander his abilities on minor conflicts. The young male's heart desired something he couldn't identify. Affection, perhaps, acceptance, purpose beyond mere demolition. He observed other young males his age, establishing into typical existences with spouses and offspring and genuine labor. Occasionally he envied their straightforwardness, yet straightforwardness was refused to him. His power distinguished him. His summons separated him. His fate loomed like a tempest formation on the boundary. He was confined between his mortal longings and his heavenly intention, comprehending neither completely. The Philistines started regarding him seriously. This wasn't merely adolescent defiance anymore. Samson was transforming into a legitimate danger to their power. Strategies were formulated, tactics conversed, snares arranged. The situation was about to transform. The lion and the nectar, crimson and sweetness. The pathway to Timnah curved through rocky elevations where untamed things existed. Samson traveled independently, his mind churning with contemplations of the Philistine young woman who had captured his gaze. She was attractive, foreign, prohibited, everything his parents cautioned him against, everything he desired. The assault arrived without caution. A young lion exploded from the vegetation, muscles coiled like mechanisms, fangs exposed in a growl of pure hunger. Most males would have fled screaming. Samson maintained his position, fascination combining with enthusiasm. The creature propelled itself through the atmosphere, claws extended, roaring its challenge. Duration appeared to decelerate as Samson observed death approaching. Then instinct assumed control. His hands shot outward, grasping the lion's jaw. The divine spirit rushed upon him like a powerful wind. The struggle persisted only moments. Samson's fingers discovered their grip, and he pulled. The lion's roar transformed into a gurgle, then silence, bones fractured like dried timber. The magnificent feline went limp in his hands, its existence extinguished as easily as snuffing a flame. He positioned the remains downward gently, almost reverently. The creature had been magnificent in life, deserving respect in death. Yet Samson felt no pride in the killing, only a strange emptiness. His strength had acted without conscious thought, leaving him feeling more like a tool than a man. He continued to Timnah without looking back. The deceased creature signified nothing to him beyond evidence of his ability. He possessed other concerns, other longings to pursue. The Philistine young woman awaited, and his heart accelerated with anticipation. Days elapsed. Samson's courtship advanced. Despite his parents' protests, they contended about combining with pagans, about breaking the regulation, about the peril of Philistine partnerships. He disregarded their cautions, motivated by emotions more powerful than understanding. The return journey transported him past the identical location where the lion had perished. Curiosity caused him to depart the pathway to examine the remains. What he discovered defied clarification. The rib structure had transformed into a hive, golden nectar dripping from the bones like liquid sunshine. Bees buzzed lazily around their improbable dwelling, having converted death into sweetness. The sight affected Samson as meaningful, though he couldn't clarify why. Existence emerging from death, beauty developing from violence, expectation flowering in the most improbable locations. He collected nectar with his hands, tasting the impossible sweetness. The flavor burst across his tongue, pure and clean and flawless. He assembled more, occupying his palms with the golden treasure. This was worth distributing. His parents received the nectar gratefully, commending its unusual flavor. They inquired where he had discovered such a rare delicacy. Samson smiled but stated nothing. Certain mysteries were intended to be maintained, certain experiences too unusual for average declarations. The image haunted his dreams. The fierce lion transformed into a source of nourishment, strength becoming sweetness, death giving birth to life. The paradox felt like a message, though he couldn't decode its meaning. Perhaps it spoke of his own nature, violence and gentleness warring within him, the capacity to destroy and create existing side by side, his calling as both judge and protector, warrior and deliverer. Or maybe it pointed to his future, victories that would taste bitter, defeats that would yield unexpected blessings, the complex tapestry of a life lived between divine purpose and human frailty. The nectar transformed into the inspiration for his wedding puzzle. Visitors would contemplate over the declarations, never determining their origin. The lion and the nectar would transform into symbols of his narrative, twin mysteries that characterized his journey. From the consumer arrived something to consume. From the powerful arrived something pleasant. Existence and death, ability and vulnerability, all combined together like nectar and crimson. The puzzle of Samson's existence, inscribed in the celestial bodies and secured with heavenly commitment. The bees proceeded with their labor, unconcerned with mortal symbolism. They had discovered a dwelling in the bones of the deceased, generating sweetness from deterioration. Nature's transformation, converting everything into something fresh. The initial wedding, affection, deception, and a casualty count. The wedding celebration extended across 7 days, as tradition required. Samson's bride radiated with attractiveness and anxious enthusiasm. Her household had arranged lavishly, expecting to impress their perilous fresh son-in-law. 30 young Philistine males functioned as companions, observing the Hebrew giant with cautious fascination. Wine flowed liberally, yet Samson's mouth remained untouched. His Nazirite commitment prohibited the grape's fermented offering. He nursed containers of water while others grew cheerful, sensing progressively separated from the celebration intended to recognize him. His bride sat adjacent to him, radiant in her wedding garments. Her gaze sparkled with joy, and something else, terror perhaps, or calculation. She was attractive beyond measurement, yet attractiveness frequently concealed depths he couldn't comprehend. The third day transported restlessness. Samson craved entertainment, something to fracture the monotony of polite discussion and ceremonial meals. His mind turned to the puzzle that had been developing since his encounter with the lion and the nectar. "Let me present a puzzle," he declared to the assembly. The Philistine companions perked upward with interest. Puzzles were serious matters in their society, tests of intellect and understanding that could determine status and respect. "If you can resolve it within the 7 days," Samson proceeded, "I'll provide you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing. If you can't resolve it, you provide me the identical." The companions exchanged glances. 30 garments represented substantial riches, yet they felt confident in their collective intelligence. Besides, what puzzle could perplex 30 educated males cooperating? Samson's voice carried across the celebration hall, rich with challenge and mystery. Out of the consumer arrived something to consume. Out of the powerful arrived something pleasant. What is it? Silence descended like a stone into motionless water. The companions frowned, their minds racing through possibilities. Consumer and consumed, powerful and pleasant. The combinations appeared endless, yet none felt correct. Days elapsed without advancement. The Philistines grew increasingly irritated, their confidence cracking like dried clay. They huddled in corners, murmuring theories and discarding them just as rapidly. The puzzle consumed their contemplations, haunting their dreams. By the 4th day, desperation had established itself. The companions approached Samson's bride with expressions of barely controlled fury. Their honor was threatened, their riches endangered. They required assistance, and she was their only expectation. "Persuade your spouse to clarify the puzzle," they urged. "If you don't, we'll incinerate you in your father's dwelling. Did you invite us here to rob us?" The danger was evident and fatal. She possessed no alternative but to comply. That evening, she approached Samson with tears streaming downward across her features. Her attractiveness transformed into a weapon, her vulnerability a tool of manipulation. "You despise me," she sobbed. "You don't genuinely cherish me. You've provided my population a puzzle, yet you haven't informed me the solution." Samson's heart twisted at her distress. "I haven't even informed my father or mother," he protested. "Why should I inform you?" Yet she persisted, weeping and pleading throughout the remaining days. Her tears eroded his resistance like water eroding stone. Affection and guilt battled with prudence and pride. Finally, on the 7th day, he surrendered. The mystery spilled outward like water from a fractured container. The lion, the nectar, the bees, the bones. She listened with growing understanding, her tears drying as knowledge occupied the void. Before sunset, she had distributed everything with her companions. At the celebration's conclusion, the 30 males approached with smug satisfaction. "What is more pleasant than nectar? What is more powerful than a lion?" Samson's features darkened with realization. The betrayal penetrated deeper than any weapon. His fresh spouse had traded his mystery for her own safety, selecting her population over her spouse. The matrimony was already fractured, poisoned by deception and terror. "If you hadn't plowed with my heifer," he growled, "you wouldn't have resolved my puzzle." The divine spirit arrived upon him like a tempest. Fury and ability merged into something terrible and magnificent. He departed the celebration without a declaration, his bride's tears accompanying him into the darkness. 30 males would perish to settle his obligation. 30 households would lament because of a puzzle and its betrayal. The wedding celebration had transformed into a funeral. Affection had transformed into vengeance, and sweetness had turned to bitter crimson. The nectar and the lion had instructed their lesson. From power arrived sweetness, yet from betrayal arrived only death. Philistine retaliation, escalation commences. The accounts of the 30 murders circulated like wildfire through Philistine lands. 30 young males cut downward in their prime by a Hebrew madman's fury. 30 households wailing in the thoroughfares demanding fairness. 30 graves excavated in the rocky soil of Ashkelon. Samson had descended on the coastal urban center like a natural catastrophe. He attacked without caution, taking existences and possessions with equal efficiency. The 30 sets of clothing he'd committed were stripped from cooling remains, settlement for a puzzle resolved through deception. The bride's household panicked when they heard the accounts. Their daughter's spouse had transformed into a killer, a force of nature beyond regulation or reason. They made the only selection that appeared safe. They provided her to one of the wedding companions, dissolving the matrimony that had already turned to poison. Yet, Samson didn't know about this betrayal yet. After his bloody labor in Ashkelon, he'd retreated to his parents' dwelling in the elevations of Dan. Duration elapsed, while his fury cooled, and his conscience struggled with what he'd accomplished. 30 males deceased because of a puzzle and wounded pride. The sorrow was genuine, yet so was the justification. They had deceived, utilized his spouse against him, treated his hospitality with contempt. The obligation had to be settled, the equilibrium restored. Still, the features of the deceased haunted his dreams. Weeks afterward, during the wheat harvest, Samson's heart softened toward his spouse. Affection, or what he thought was affection, summoned him back to Timnah. He transported a young goat as a peace presentation, expecting to bridge the gap his violence had generated. "Let me proceed to my spouse in her chamber," he informed her father when he arrived. The elderly male's features went pale. "I thought you despised her entirely," he stammered. "I provided her to your companion, yet her younger sister is more attractive. Take her instead." The declaration struck Samson like a physical impact. His spouse, the woman he'd killed for, had been provided to another male. The betrayal was complete, the humiliation absolute. His offerings had been rejected, his matrimony dissolved, his affection treated like refuse. Fury exploded through him like molten metal, yet this occasion he channeled it differently. No more random violence, no more personal vendettas. If the Philistines desired war, he would provide them war on a scale they couldn't imagine. He captured 300 foxes, a feat that would have appeared impossible to average males. Each creature was trapped, tamed sufficiently to be handled. Then arrived the diabolical inspiration. He tied them in pairs, tail to tail, with torches fastened between them. The timing was flawless. Harvest season signified agricultural lands full of ripe grain, olive groves heavy with fruit, vineyards ready for picking. The Philistines' riches lay exposed, awaiting the torch. Samson ignited the brands and released his living weapons into the darkness. The foxes ran in horror, setting fire to everything they contacted. Grain, agricultural lands exploded into barriers of flame. Olive trees transformed into torches, vineyards crackled and perished. The sky radiated orange with demolition as months of labor turned to ash. The damage was catastrophic. Complete harvests vanished in a solitary darkness. Agricultural workers who had labored all year discovered themselves facing starvation. The economic impact affected every level of Philistine society. When dawn fractured, the scope of the catastrophe became evident. Thousands of acres lay blackened and ruined. The atmosphere reeked of smoke and failure, and everyone knew who was responsible. The Hebrew with the impossible power had attacked again. The Philistine rulers assembled in emergency assembly. This wasn't merely personal revenge anymore. Samson had declared war on their complete civilization. The duration for tolerance had elapsed. They discovered the bride's household cowering in their dwelling, terrified of both sides. The Philistines' fairness was rapid and brutal. They incinerated her and her father alive, their screams reverberating through the settlement as flames consumed the dwelling. The message was evident. Betrayal would be punished. Weakness would not be tolerated. Yet, they had miscalculated Samson's response. The woman's death, however it had occurred, was still connected to his narrative. More crimson had been spilled because of his actions. The pattern of violence had commenced in earnest. Samson's personal grievances had escalated into tribal warfare. The Philistines had lost their harvest and their patience. The Israelites would soon be caught in the crossfire. War was arriving to the territory of judges, and its harbinger was a male whose power arrived from the divine, yet whose understanding arrived from his own wounded heart. The jawbone of a donkey, solitary male military force. The Philistine military force moved like a plague across the landscape. 3,000 soldiers, their bronze protective gear glinting in the harsh sunlight, their spears bristling like a forest of death. They arrived seeking one male, yet their existence threatened a complete tribe. The males of Judah observed from their elevated positions as the adversary force established camp in their lands. Terror descended over the settlements like early mist. Mothers concealed their offspring. Fathers sharpened their agricultural implements. Everyone knew why the Philistines had arrived. "We've arrived for Samson," the Philistine commanders declared. "Deliver him, and we'll depart peacefully. Decline, and we'll take him by force." The elders of Judah assembled in frantic assembly. 3,000 against their dispersed militia signified massacre. Their finest fighters couldn't maintain position against expert soldiers with superior implements. They possessed only one selection. A delegation of 3,000 Judahites climbed the rocky stronghold of Etam, where Samson had taken refuge. They discovered him isolated, positioned on a ledge overlooking the lowland, observing the adversary encampment with unreadable gaze. "Don't you understand the Philistines govern over us?" their representative required. "What have you accomplished to us?" Samson's voice bore no apology, no regret. "I merely accomplished to them what they accomplished to me." The reasoning was straightforward yet devastating. Personal fairness had transformed into tribal catastrophe. The elders pressed their situation with growing urgency. They couldn't defend him, couldn't battle for him, couldn't permit their population to perish for his vengeance. "We've arrived to bind you and deliver you to the Philistines," they stated. Samson studied their features, perceiving terror combined with determination. These were his own population, his brothers in blood and faith. He wouldn't force them to select between loyalty and survival. "Commit to me that you won't eliminate me yourselves," he stated finally. They committed the oath gladly. This wasn't about execution, merely surrender. They bound him with 2 fresh ropes, dense and powerful, then commenced the lengthy march downward to the lowland. Samson traveled peacefully among them, his power concealed beneath the bonds. The Philistines celebrated when they perceived their prize approaching. The giant who had terrorized their urban centers was finally in chains. His hair still flowed freely, identifying him as one of those unusual Hebrew holy males, yet ropes negated whatever magic his deity might provide. As the party reached the lowland floor, something altered in Samson's demeanor. The divine spirit rushed upon him like a powerful wind. The ropes around his arms transformed like burned flax, falling away like ash. His bonds fractured and dissolved. The Philistines' celebrations turned to shouts of alarm. Some reached for their implements, others attempted to retreat, yet 3,000 soldiers pressed together made movement difficult. They had transformed into their own snare. Samson's gaze descended on a fresh jawbone positioned nearby, still moist from its recent separation from a donkey's skull. He collected the crude implement, testing its mass and equilibrium. It would serve. What occurred next would be remembered for generations. One male with a portion of bone transformed into a military force of demolition. The jawbone swung in fatal arcs, crushing skulls, fracturing necks, shattering bones. Philistine soldiers descended like wheat before a scythe. The expert fighters had trained for organized combat, shield barriers, coordinated assaults. They were helpless against this whirlwind of violence. Their bronze protective gear signified nothing against the impossible power behind each impact. Some attempted to form defensive formations, yet Samson moved too rapidly. He attacked from unexpected angles, leaping over shields, ducking under spears. The jawbone transformed into an extension of his will, dealing death with surgical precision. Others attempted to retreat, yet the press of bodies confined them. Panic circulated through the ranks like disease. Males trampled their own comrades in desperation to escape. The organized military force dissolved into a mob of terrified individuals. The slaughter proceeded until the sun commenced to descend. Bodies lay heaped like cordwood across the lowland floor. The jawbone, worn smooth by constant use, finally cracked and splintered. Samson permitted the portions to descend from his hands. He observed across the field of death, counting the remains in neat rows. 1,000 Philistines would never return to their dwellings. 1,000 households would lament. 1,000 graves would identify his triumph. Exhaustion and thirst overwhelmed him. The heavenly power that had transported him through conflict departed him weak and vacant. He cried outward to the divine, pleading for water, fearing he might perish of thirst after surviving the conflict. The divine split a hollow location in the rock, and water gushed forth. Samson consumed deeply, his power returning with each swallow. The location was identified on Hakore, the spring of the caller, identifying the spot where the celestial realm answered desperation. The males of Judah who had bound him maintained speechless among the carnage. Their captive had transformed into their rescuer. Their disgrace had transformed into their salvation. The Philistines retreated, abandoning their deceased to nourish the vultures. Accounts of the triumph circulated like wildfire through the tribes of Israel. Samson the judge had been birthed in conflict, his power inscribed in adversary crimson. The duration of concealment was concluded. Delilah's reality, woman in the shadows. The lowland of Sorek extended between the elevations like a green ribbon, its streams nourishing orchards and vineyards that had known tranquility for decades. Here, distant from the disorder of tribal warfare, a different kind of existence flourished. Traders, skilled workers, and agricultural workers labored side by side, regardless of their ancestry. Delilah moved through this reality like a shadow made flesh, attractive beyond measurement, yet meticulously invisible when she selected to be. Her origins remained mysteriously vague, her loyalties deliberately unclear. Some murmured she was Hebrew, others claimed Philistine blood. The reality mattered less than her usefulness. Her dwelling sat on the boundary between lands, a flawless position for someone who dealt in details. Travelers halted to rest. Traders paused to exchange. Soldiers sought entertainment. Each visitor transported accounts, rumors, mysteries that could be purchased or traded to the highest bidder. She had learned survival in a harsh school. The weak perished young in the borderlands. The naive were consumed by those who comprehended ability. Delilah had selected to be neither. She cultivated power through intelligence, protection through indispensability. The Philistine rulers knew her value. She could move freely among the Hebrew settlements, her attractiveness opening entrances that remained sealed to their informants. Her dwelling transformed into a listening post, her sleeping chamber, a confessional for males who communicated too freely in passion's aftermath. Yet Delilah was no simple prostitute, despite what historical records would afterward claim. She was a businesswoman in the most perilous trade imaginable. Details were her currency, mysteries her stock in trade. She dealt with all sides because neutrality signified survival. Her servants were meticulously selected for loyalty and discretion. They moved through commercial centers and taverns, assembling murmurs and rumors. A system of gazes and ears extended from her modest dwelling, reaching into every corner of the borderlands. The Hebrew judge identified Samson was well known to her, though they had never encountered. His exploits provided endless discussion among her visitors. Some identified him a monster, others a champion. All agreed he was perilous beyond measurement. She had observed from a distance as his legendary status grew, the lion ripped apart with bare hands, the wedding that concluded in massacre, the foxes that incinerated the harvest, the jawbone that slaughtered a military force. Each narrative appeared more impossible than the previous. Yet Delilah comprehended something others missed. Samson was a male, not a myth. He possessed longings, weaknesses, requirements that his power couldn't fulfill. The correct woman, approaching at the correct moment, might discover cracks in his protective covering. This knowledge remained theoretical until the Philistine rulers arrived, calling. 5 rulers arriving together signified serious matters. They communicated in hushed tones about their adversary, about failed attempts to capture him, about the requirement for a different approach. "We've attempted force," Lord Sauron admitted. "We've attempted ambush, poison, deception. Nothing functions. His power arrives from his deity, and we can't battle the celestial realm with weapons," the others signaled grimly. Samson had transformed into more than a military problem. He was a symbol of Hebrew resistance, evidence that their deities still battled for them. His very existence challenged Philistine power. Yet every male possesses weaknesses, another ruler proceeded. Pride, fury, desire. Discover the correct pressure point, and even giants collapse. They observed Delilah with calculating gazes. She was their final expectation, their ultimate gambit. If she could uncover the origin of Samson's power, they could finally demolish him. The price they presented reflected their desperation. 1,100 portions of silver from each ruler, 5,500 portions total, more riches than most populations perceived in 10 lifetimes. Sufficient to purchase territory, servants, security, sufficient to transform everything. Delilah listened without commitment. The task was perilous beyond measurement. If Samson uncovered her deception, her death would be rapid and certain. If she succeeded, the Philistines might eliminate her to defend their mystery. Either pathway led to shadows, yet the currency was genuine, and currency signified freedom. She could depart the borderlands, commence fresh somewhere safe, construct an existence beyond the reach of wars and rumors. The temptation was enormous. She requested duration to consider, observing the rulers depart with calculating gazes. They would return for her response, and she would require to be ready. The situation was about to commence, and the stakes were elevated than ever before. That darkness she maintained on her roof, observing outward over the peaceful lowland. Tomorrow might transport the greatest challenge of her existence. Or it might transport the chance to escape this reality of shadows eternally. The selection was hers independently to make. Gaza's gates, Samson's wildest feat. Gaza sprawled along the shoreline like a magnificent beast, basking in the Mediterranean sun. Massive barriers surrounded the urban center, their stones worn smooth by centuries of salt, wind, and mortal determination. 5 gates regulated access. Each one a stronghold within a stronghold, protected by expert soldiers who feared nothing. The urban center pulsed with riches and ability. Vessels from remote territories crowded the harbor, their holds occupied with foreign merchandise. Traders haggled in a dozen tongues, while slaves hauled cargo through narrow thoroughfares. The scent of spices, perfume, and mortal sweat blended into an intoxicating mixture. Samson entered Gaza as evening shadows lengthened across the cobblestones. His standing had preceded him, yet the urban center was large, sufficient for anonymity. He pulled his cloak hood forward, concealing the distinctive mane of hair that identified him as surely as a brand. The dwelling maintained in the merchant's quarter, its painted barriers and sculpted doorframe advertising the business conducted within. The woman who greeted him was skilled in her trade, attractive in the way of expert entertainers. She posed no queries, asked for no identities. What passed between them was straightforward and uncomplicated. Payment in exchange for pleasure, coin for consolation. Without criticism or entanglements, she gave him exactly what he required. Within her embrace, Samson discovered brief refuge from the heaviness of his divine purpose. Yet Gaza's leaders remained alert. Reports of the Hebrew giant's arrival raced across the city like wildfire consuming parched wheat. Sentries hurried to their stations. The gates received reinforcement. Strategies took shape. They intended to capture the demon who had massacred their forces. The snare tightened noiselessly as darkness descended. Warriors encircled the dwelling. Bowmen positioned themselves atop adjacent structures. Gate sentries obtained explicit orders. Nobody departs before sunrise. No allowances, no payments accepted, no clemency shown. Daybreak exposed the trap's flawlessness. Every pathway stood monitored, every route of departure sealed. The settlement had transformed into a jail, and Samson represented its sole, meaningful captive. Well, they prepared to wait however long proved necessary. Yet the Hebrew magistrate possessed his own intentions. Around the midnight hour, he arose from the woman's sleeping quarters and clothed himself without sound. She maintained the pretense of slumber, perceiving the peril that surrounded her residence. This evening would linger in memory long after her existence faded. Well, Samson proceeded through Gaza's passages like someone taking a leisurely walk. His footfalls resonated against stone barriers, while concealed observers tensed in anticipation. He appeared oblivious to the countless eyes monitoring his progress. The primary gate rose before him, 30 feet of timber and metal strengthened with copper fixtures. Two enormous towers bordered the passageway, their parapets crowded with armed sentries. The construction embodied generations of craftwork intended to resist siege machinery and demolition devices. The sentries observed his approach with mounting bewilderment. Was this surrender? Some reckless attack? Their grips tightened around their armaments as the giant advanced. Samson inspected the gate like an artisan, evaluating another craftsman's creation. His digits traced the metal pivots, tested the timber supports, assessed the copper bracings. Then both hands seized the gates. Divine spirit descended upon him like rolling thunder. His sinews expanded as supernatural power surged through mortal form. The enormous gates groaned, their bases trembling beneath unthinkable force. Stone fractured, metal shrieked, timber shattered. The gates that had defended Gaza across generations ripped loose from their anchors like children's playthings. Samson hoisted the complete assembly, supports and crossbars and everything, raising it overhead. The sentries remained motionless in astonishment. Their stronghold had become a trinket in a madman's grasp. Some reached for arms, others escaped in horror. None ventured near the Hebrew, who wielded their gate like a prize. Samson commenced walking, bearing his load through the settlement streets. The mass that ought to have crushed any mortal felt light as down. Residents stumbled from their dwellings, gaping at the inconceivable spectacle. He walked throughout the darkness, ascending the slopes that encircled Gaza. The gate's burden never appeared to weigh him down. The journey never appeared to exhaust him. By sunrise, he had arrived at a hilltop above Hebron, 40 miles from coastal waters. There he deposited his trophy, Gaza's gates oriented skyward like an oblation. Morning sunlight illuminated the copper fittings, transforming them to precious metal. The emblem of Philistine authority had become a testament to Hebrew might. The communication was unmistakable to all witnesses. No barrier could restrain Israel's judge. No fortress could confine what the divine had liberated. The settlement that considered itself unconquerable had been humiliated by one individual. Gaza lamented its degradation, while Israel praised its defender. Yet Samson experienced no victory, only hollowness. The accomplishment had been remarkable, but it resolved nothing. The Philistines would reconstruct their gate. Their animosity would intensify. The giant departed from his monument, abandoning the gates to elements and duration. Somewhere distant, a woman named Delilah was preparing to welcome her initial callers from the Philistine rulers. The greatest confrontation of his existence was approaching, the attraction of the valley. Encountering Delilah. Within the valley of Sorek, where timeless waterways carved tender routes through limestone elevations, two fates would intersect. This valley occupied space between realms, Philistine domain merging into Israelite territories. Traders journeyed its pathways. Commerce seekers erected their shelters. And here, in this borderland of traditions, history's most notorious treachery would commence. Samson, understood this valley intimately. He had traversed these trails as a youth, back when his power felt like blessing rather than burden. The olive groves murmured recognizable melodies. The fig orchards provided shelter from summer's intensity. But presently, at 35, he bore the burden of 2 decades of bloodshed. His palms had slain thousands. His fury had incinerated complete harvests. His very identity made mothers draw their offspring near. Yet, here in Sorek, something distinct awakened. Reports circulated through the valley like dawn vapor. A woman of remarkable beauty had established residence in a dwelling of sculpted stone. She communicated in numerous tongues. She received guests with wine and narratives. Her identity was Delilah. Some claimed she originated from the coastline, offspring of Philistine nobility. Others murmured she was Hebrew, expelled for reasons nobody would articulate. Her history remained enigmatic, but her arrival commanded notice. Men journeyed from remote settlements merely to glimpse her countenance. Artists crafted compositions about her gaze. Traders presented fortunes for her attention. Samson initially observed her at the weekly marketplace. She navigated through the masses like water streaming past stones, elegant, unhurried, conscious of every glance. Her dark tresses captured sunlight like burnished copper. Her expression contained mysteries. When their gazes connected across the ocean of merchants and purchasers, existence seemed to halt. She maintained eye contact. Most individuals didn't. His standing preceded him universally, the untamed figure who dismembered lions, who transported settlement gates upon his back, who abandoned armies deceased in his path. But Delilah sustained his gaze with unwavering assurance. Her lips formed the slightest expression, as though she had anticipated him. That evening, Samson discovered himself passing her dwelling. Lamplight radiated through latticed openings. The fragrance of jasmine drifted from her garden. He convinced himself he was merely investigating the valley, yet his steps transported him back the following evening, and the evening after. On the 4th evening, she materialized at her entrance. She adorned a garment of deep violet, the shade of royalty and sovereignty. Silver ornaments captured the moonlight. Her voice bore the melody of faraway coasts. Samson of Dan, she spoke as though they were long-time acquaintances. I wondered when you would finally converse instead of merely passing. He felt like a youth discovered stealing dates. This woman, this stranger, had been monitoring him, monitoring her. The awareness should have embarrassed him. Instead, it excited him. When had anyone recently surprised him? I was determining if you were genuine, he stated. Beautiful women in valleys occasionally prove to be illusions. She laughed, and the sound resembled silver chimes. Touch my hand and discover, he complied. Her skin was warm, genuine, alive. But something additional transferred between them in that instant. A recognition, perhaps, or a warning. Later, much later, he would recall this initial contact and question if he had sensed his fate in her fingers. "Will you enter?" she inquired. Her dwelling was unlike anything he had witnessed. Tapestries from Egypt adorned the barriers. Cushions from Babylon encircled low platforms. Incense burned in corners, saturating the atmosphere with cinnamon and myrrh. This was not the residence of a simple valley woman. This was the dwelling of someone with associations, with prosperity, with authority. They conversed until sunrise. She inquired about his journeys, his conflicts, his existence as a judge. He discovered himself sharing narratives he had never disclosed. Not the legends people circulated, but the reality. The isolation of strength, the weight of everyone's anticipations, the manner violence had become his sole dialect with existence. She listened without criticism. Her inquiries were contemplative, authentic. When he described the heaviness of his calling, she nodded as though she comprehended. When he spoke of the seclusion that accompanied being different, her gaze showed understanding. "Do you ever wish you could be someone else?" she asked, as morning illumination crept through the openings. "Every day," he confessed, "but this is who I was born to be." "Perhaps," she said gently, "or perhaps you could choose to become someone new." The words remained with him as he walked home through the awakening valley. Choose to become someone new. The concept felt perilous and wonderful. For the initial time in years, he felt hope stirring in his chest. That hope would prove to be his undoing, love or assignment. Delilah's concealed controllers. 3 days following Samson's initial visit, 5 men arrived at Delilah's entrance. They came at twilight when shadows extended long and neighbors closed their shutters. These were not typical visitors. They moved with the deliberate elegance of those habituated to violence. Their garments were refined, their armaments more refined. Their gold displayed the emblem of Philistine rulers. The leader was Achish of Gath, a man whose expression never reached his gaze. Behind him came delegates from Ashkelon, Ashdod, Gaza, and Ekron, the 5 great settlements of the Philistines. Together they governed a confederation that extended from the ocean to the elevations. Together they possessed one problem they could not resolve. Samson, Delilah, received them in her most elegant chamber. She had been anticipating this visit, though not so promptly. The game was beginning earlier than planned. "You honor my dwelling," she said, offering wine from silver vessels, though I suspect this is not a social visit. Achish studied her countenance. "Direct. Good. We prefer clarity in our arrangements." "What arrangement?" "The arrangement where you discover the mystery of Samson's strength." The words suspended in the atmosphere like incense vapor. Delilah's expression remained perfectly composed, but her heartbeat quickened. This was the moment she had prepared for, yet feared. "I'm not sure I comprehend," she said cautiously. "Of course you do." Achish leaned forward. "You are the daughter of Philax of Ashkelon. Your father served our houses before his death. You were educated in our institutions, trained in our methods. Did you think we wouldn't recognize you?" The mask slipped for just an instant. Delilah's history was supposed to be buried. She had spent 5 years constructing a new identity, a new existence. But blood summons to blood, and obligations pass from father to offspring. "That was long ago," she said. "Debts don't mature like wine," said the Lord from Ekron. "They grow more powerful with time. Your father borrowed extensively to finance his trade routes." Achish continued. "When he died, those obligations became yours. We've been patient. We've allowed you to build this comfortable existence, but now we need recompense." Delilah set down her wine vessel. "What kind of recompense?" "Information. Samson has killed thousands of our people. He's disrupted our commerce, destroyed our crops, made us look weak before other nations. Our armies can't touch him, our weapons can't hurt him, but he's begun visiting you. So, you're going to find out why he's invincible, and then you're going to help us destroy him." The Lord from Gaza reached into his garment and produced a leather container. When he opened it, the chamber filled with the gleam of silver pieces. 1,100 pieces of silver from each of our settlements. 5,500 pieces total, enough to purchase your freedom and live like royalty. Delilah stared at the silver. It was more currency than most people witnessed in an entire lifetime. Enough to disappear forever, to start fresh in Egypt or Babylon. Enough to purchase not just freedom, but authority. "And if I refuse?" Achish's expression turned cold. "Then you'll discover that some debts are paid in blood." The threat was unmistakable. These men didn't make empty promises. Cross them, and she would join her father in the grave. Serve them, and she would be wealthy beyond dreams. But there was a third option they hadn't considered. She could play their game and win it on her own terms. "I'll need time," she said. "How much time?" He's cautious, suspicious. "If I push too hard, too quickly, he'll disappear into the wilderness. Give me 2 months. Achish considered this. 1 month. If you haven't delivered by then, we'll find other methods. And if I succeed, then you'll be the woman who brought down the strongest man in existence. That's worth more than silver." After they departed, Delilah sat alone in her chamber. The silver pieces lay scattered on the platform like fallen stars. She picked up one and held it to the lamp. The metal was warm, genuine, heavy with possibility. She thought about Samson, the way he had looked at her, the loneliness in his voice, the trust beginning to bloom in his gaze. She thought about her father, who had died owing these men more than he could ever repay. She thought about her own future, hanging between freedom and death. The choice should have been simple, but as she stared at the silver, she realized, well, something that surprised her. She actually liked Samson, maybe even more than liked him. He was dangerous, yes, but not to her. He was gentle with her, careful, almost reverent. When had anyone recently treated her like something precious? The thought should have made her task impossible. Instead, it made it more complex. She would play their game, but she would play it by her own rules. She would discover Samson's secret, but she would decide what to do with it. The silver pieces clinked softly as she gathered them back into the container. Currency was useful, but information was authority, and authority, she was learning, was the only thing that made you truly free. Outside, darkness settled over the valley like a covering. Somewhere in the blackness, Samson was probably thinking about her, planning his next visit. He had no idea that his fate was being decided in a chamber full of silver and shadows. First attempt. Bind me with fresh cords. Summer heat pressed down on the valley like a burden. Samson had been visiting Delilah for 3 weeks, and their evening conversations had become the brightest part of his days. He brought her figs from the hillsides, honey from wild bees, stories from his travels. She offered wine, laughter, and something he hadn't felt in years, tranquility. Tonight felt different. The atmosphere hummed with tension. Delilah moved around her chamber like a caged bird, arranging cushions, lighting extra lamps, pouring wine with hands that trembled just slightly. "You seem troubled," Samson said, settling onto his usual pile of cushions. "Do I?" She sat beside him, closer than usual. "Perhaps I'm just curious." "About what?" "About you. About the stories people tell." She traced patterns on his arm with one finger. "They say you're the strongest man who ever lived, that you've killed 1,000 men with a donkey's jaw, that you carried the gates of Gaza 20 miles uphill." He laughed, but the sound was uncomfortable. "People exaggerate. Do they? Or are you truly as strong as they claim?" Something in her tone made him look at her more carefully. Her eyes were bright, almost feverish. Her body was tense, like a bowstring drawn tight. "Why do you ask?" "Because I want to know you. All of you. Your strength, your secrets, your heart." She leaned closer. "Tell me, Samson, what makes you so powerful? What's the source of your strength?" The question hit him like cold water. In all their conversations, she had never directly asked about his power. She had skirted around it, shown interest in his deeds, but never demanded answers. Now, suddenly, she was pressing him like a judge questioning a witness. "My strength comes from God," he said carefully. "But how? Through what means? Is it something you consume? Something you wear? Some ritual you perform?" He studied her face. The woman who had been so patient, so gentle, was now almost aggressive in her curiosity. Warning signals rang in his mind, the same instincts that had kept him alive through 20 years of war. "Why do you need to know?" "Because I worry about you." She grabbed his hands and hers were shaking. "You have so many enemies. The Philistines would do anything to destroy you. If something happened to your strength, if you lost your power somehow. Are you afraid I can't protect you?" "I'm afraid you can't protect yourself." The words sounded genuine, but something felt wrong. Samson had learned to trust his instincts. Right now, they were screaming. "If you must know," he said slowly, "my strength would leave me if I were tied with 7 fresh cords, ones that have never been dried." Delilah's eyes widened. "Fresh cords from animals just killed. If someone bound me with 7 such cords, I would become as weak as any other man." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, and it was like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Thank you for trusting me?" you asked. "I did, and you answered." That means more to me than you know." The rest of the evening passed pleasantly. They talked about other things, the valley, the weather, plans for the next day. When Samson finally left, Delilah kissed his cheek and whispered, "Sleep well, my lion." But Samson didn't sleep well. He walked the hills until dawn, thinking about the questions she had asked, about the desperation in her voice, about the way she had pressed him for answers. He thought about other women he had known, his first wife, who had betrayed the answer to his riddle, the prostitute in Gaza, who had tried to drug his wine. The pattern was always the same. Beautiful women with hidden agendas asking questions that seemed innocent but led to betrayal. Was Delilah different, or was he just hoping she was? 3 days later, she sent word that she had prepared a special dinner. When he arrived, her house was decorated with flowers. Candles flickered in every corner. She wore a gown of shimmering blue, her hair adorned with silver combs. "You look like a goddess," he said. "You look tired. Sit, I have your favorite wine." The wine was indeed his favorite, a rare vintage from the hill country. They drank and talked and laughed. The meal was perfect, the company even better. As the evening wore on, Samson felt his worries fading. "I have a surprise," Delilah said as they reclined on cushions. "What kind of surprise?" "A game, a test of your strength." Before he could respond, she produced 7 thick cords from behind a cushion. They were fresh, still damp, exactly as he had described. "Where did you get those?" he asked. "The market. A butcher owed me a favor." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I want to see if what you told me is true. Delilah, please, just this once, let me tie you up and show me how you break free. I want to see your strength with my own eyes." The request was so strange, so unexpected, that he almost laughed. But something in her manner stopped him. She was breathing fast, her hands trembling with excitement or nerves. "This is foolish," he said. "Humor me." Against his better judgment, he allowed her to bind his arms with the cords. She worked quickly, skillfully, as if she had done this before. When she finished, 7 fresh cords held him tight. "There," she said, stepping back. "Now, show me your strength." He flexed his arms. The cords snapped like thread, falling away like broken dreams. His strength had not left him. The secret he had told her was a lie. But instead of looking disappointed, Delilah looked relieved. "Magnificent," she breathed. "You're incredible. You seem surprised that I broke free." "I'm not surprised. I'm amazed. There's a difference." She helped him brush away the broken cords, her touch gentle and loving. But Samson noticed something else. She was studying the pieces, examining how they had broken, memorizing every detail. "I should go," he said. "Must you?" "It's still early. I have business in the morning." She walked him to the door, kissed him goodbye, whispered sweet words. But as he walked away, Samson felt the weight of certainty settling on his shoulders. Delilah was playing a game. The question was whether he was her partner or her target. Behind him, lamplight flickered in her windows, and somewhere in the darkness, he imagined he could hear the sound of silver coins changing hands. The second try, new ropes only. A week passed before Samson returned to Delilah's house. He spent the time in the wilderness, hunting, thinking, wrestling with doubts. Part of him wanted to disappear into the desert to avoid whatever trap was being laid, but a stronger part refused to run. He had never fled from a fight, and he wouldn't start now. Besides, he told himself maybe he was wrong. Maybe her questions came from love, not betrayal. Maybe he was seeing enemies where none existed. When he finally knocked on her door, Delilah greeted him with tears in her eyes. "I thought you weren't coming back," she said, throwing her arms around him. "I had things to consider." "What things?" "Whether you were who you claimed to be." She pulled back, her face showing hurt and confusion. "What do you mean?" "The other night, the cords, the questions. It felt like a test." "It was a test," she said simply. "A test of whether you trusted me enough to be vulnerable. A test of whether I could see your strength without it frightening me." And I wasn't frightened. I was amazed. You're not just strong in body, Samson. You're strong in spirit. That's what makes you special. Her words sounded sincere. Her tears looked real. But Samson had learned not to trust appearances. Still, when she led him inside, he followed. The house looked different tonight. Simpler, fewer decorations, dimmer lights. She wore a plain white dress instead of elaborate gowns. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders. I wanted tonight to be different, she explained. No games, no tests, just us. They shared a simple meal: bread, cheese, olives, water instead of wine. Their conversation was quiet, peaceful. She told him about her childhood by the sea, about learning to swim in dangerous currents, about the way salt air could make you feel both free and homesick. I've never felt at home anywhere, she said, until I came to this valley. Until I met you. You make it sound like destiny. Don't you believe in destiny? I believe in choices. We choose our paths even when we pretend they're chosen for us. She was quiet for a long moment. What if someone's path was chosen for them? What if they had no real choice? Then they'd have to make the best of a bad situation, even if it meant hurting someone they cared about. The question hung in the air like incense. Samson looked at her carefully. Are you asking me something specific? I'm asking if you believe people can change. If someone who was born to do one thing could choose to do another. I think, he said slowly, that we all have the power to surprise ourselves. Later, as they reclined on cushions, Delilah began asking questions again, but these were different questions, softer, more subtle. The chords didn't work, she said playfully. You lied to me. I told you a story. There's a difference. Is there? Tell me another story then. What would really rob you of your strength? He should have gotten up and left, should have recognized the trap. But her voice was gentle, her manner loving, and he was tired of being suspicious, tired of seeing betrayal in every glance. New ropes, he said, ones that have never been used. If I were bound with new ropes, my strength would fail me. New ropes, she repeated as if memorizing the words. But that's just another story. Of course it is. She smiled and kissed his forehead. You're too clever to tell me your real secrets. The next morning, Samson woke to find new ropes beside the bed. Thick ones, obviously unused, still smelling of the workshop where they were made. Where did these come from? He asked. Delilah was preparing breakfast. Her back to him. The rope maker's shop. I thought we might need them. For what? To secure the goats. They've been getting into the grain storage. The explanation sounded reasonable, but when Samson examined the ropes, he noticed they were much too fine for securing animals. These were the kind of ropes used for ships or for binding prisoners. Delilah, he said carefully, are you planning to tie me up again? She turned, her face bright with innocence. Would you like me to? No. Then I won't. But if you changed your mind. She served him breakfast. Figs, honey, fresh bread. They ate in comfortable silence, but Samson noticed she kept glancing at the ropes as if calculating something. When he finally rose to leave, she walked him to the door. Will I see you tonight? I don't know. I have matters to attend to. What matters? Judge matters. You wouldn't find them interesting. She kissed him goodbye, but her lips felt cold against his cheek. As he walked away, he turned back once. She was still in the doorway, watching him go. The morning sun caught her hair, making it shine like gold. Beautiful, he thought, and dangerous. That evening he didn't go to her house. Instead, he climbed to a high hill overlooking the valley. From there, he could see her home, her garden, her courtyard. As darkness fell, he watched 5 figures approach her door. They moved like shadows, but moonlight caught the glint of weapons, the shine of expensive robes, Philistine lords. He was sure of it. They stayed for an hour. When they left, one of them carried a small bundle, the kind of bundle that might contain new ropes. Another carried a leather pouch that clinked with the sound of coins. Samson sat on the hill until dawn, watching, thinking, understanding. Delilah was not his lover. She was his hunter, and he was her prey. The question now was what to do with this knowledge. He could disappear, vanish into the wilderness, never see her again. He could confront her, force her to admit her betrayal. Or he could continue the game, see how far she would go, discover who was pulling her strings. As the sun rose over the valley, Samson made his choice. He would play her game, but he would play it by his rules. The trap was set, but the hunter was about to become the hunted. Weaving the hair, getting warmer. 2 weeks of silence stretched between them. Samson didn't visit, Delilah didn't send messages. The valley felt empty, as if holding its breath. During those long days, Delilah paced her chambers like a caged animal. The Philistine lords had made their displeasure clear. 2 attempts, 2 failures. Their patience was wearing thin. Achish had visited 3 times, each meeting more threatening than the last. "Perhaps you're not as skilled as your reputation suggests," he had said on his latest visit. "Perhaps your target is more careful than you assumed," she replied. "Careful men don't visit beautiful women in the night. Careful men don't tell stories about fresh cords and new ropes. He's playing with you, girl. The question is why?" Delilah had no answer for that. She only knew that Samson was slipping away, and with him, her only chance at freedom. On the 15th night, she made a decision. She would go to him. She found him at the sacred grove, where he sometimes went to think. Ancient oaks formed a natural temple, their branches woven together like prayers. Samson sat beneath the largest tree, his back against the trunk, staring up at the stars. "You're avoiding me," she said, stepping into the clearing. "I'm avoiding complications. I'm a complication. You're something. I haven't decided what." She sat beside him, careful not to touch. "I've missed you. Have you? Every day, every night, the house feels empty without your stories. I'm sure you've had other visitors to keep you company." The comment was casual, but it carried weight. Delilah felt her heart race. What did he know? What had he seen? "What do you mean?" "I mean, a beautiful woman living alone rarely stays alone for long. I choose to be alone until you." "Why me?" "Because you're different. Because you see me as more than just a pretty face or a useful tool." The irony of the words hit her even as she spoke them. She was being exactly what she claimed he saw beyond. A tool, a weapon aimed at his heart. "People are rarely what they seem," he said quietly. "Are you what you seem?" "I'm exactly what I seem. A man trying to serve God while fighting his own nature. A judge who makes poor choices. A warrior who's tired of war." "Then why do you keep fighting?" "Because it's what I was born to do. Because the alternative is watching my people suffer. Because I don't know how to stop." His honesty was like a knife to her heart. Here was a man who told the truth even when it hurt, and she was lying to him with every breath. "I want to help you," she said. "How?" "I don't know. But you don't have to carry everything alone." He looked at her, then really looked at her. "You're full of surprises, Delilah. Good surprises or bad ones. I'm still deciding." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to night sounds, owls calling, wind through leaves, the distant cry of a jackal. The moon was full, casting silver light through the branches. "Tell me about your strength," she said eventually. Again, the truth, this time, not stories, not games. "I want to understand you." "Why?" "Because I think your strength is also your burden, and I want to help carry it." Samson was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost dreamy. "My hair has never been cut. It's part of a vow I made before I was born. As long as my hair remains uncut, my strength remains." Delilah's breath caught. This felt different from his other answers, more personal, more real. "Your hair. The visible sign of an invisible covenant. 7 locks never touched by blade or razor. What would happen if it were cut? I would become like any other man. Weak, mortal, ordinary. Would you want that to be ordinary? Sometimes I dream about it. A simple life, a normal family. No one looking to me for salvation or revenge. You could have that. Could I?" I think my destiny was written before I drew my first breath." Delilah reached out and touched one of his locks. The hair was thick, coarse, shot through with silver. It fell to his shoulders in 7 distinct braids, each one carefully maintained. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's a chain, a golden chain, but still a chain." "Then why not break it?" "Because some chains are also anchors. Cut them, and you drift away from everything that matters." She continued to stroke his hair, feeling the texture, the weight, the life in it. This was the secret. This was the source of his power, and he had just handed it to her like a gift. "I should go," she said. "Should you?" "Yes. Before I do something we'll both regret." She stood to leave, but he caught her hand. "Delilah, yes. Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're planning, remember this moment. Remember that I trusted you." The words were like arrows to her heart. She pulled away and fled through the trees, tears streaming down her face. Behind her, Samson remained beneath the oak, watching her go, his 7 locks shining silver in the moonlight. The next morning, she sent a message to the Philistine lords. 3 words, "Come tonight ready." But even as she prepared for betrayal, she wondered if she could go through with it. The memory of his trust burned in her chest like poison. The feel of his hair in her fingers seemed to mock her. She had the secret. Now the question was whether she had the courage to use it. That evening, she prepared her house with special care. She laid out her finest robes, her sharpest knife, her strongest wine. She practiced the movements she would need, how to approach him, how to position herself, how to make the cuts without waking him. But when the sun set and the appointed hour arrived, she found herself paralyzed. The knife felt heavy in her hands. The wine tasted like ash in her mouth. She had betrayed many people in her life, but she had never betrayed someone who loved her. And despite everything, despite the lies and the games and the silver coins, she was beginning to suspect that Samson might actually love her. The thought should have made her task easier. Instead, it made it impossible. Outside, footsteps approached her door, the Philistine lords coming to collect their prize. But Delilah had no prize to offer, only questions and guilt, and the terrible knowledge that she was trapped between 2 men who would destroy her, the one who trusted her and the ones who owned her. The betrayal was close now. She could feel it approaching like a storm, but whether she would be its agent or its victim remained to be seen. The emotional breakdown. "How can you say you love me?" 3 days after the meeting in the grove, Delilah's world began to crumble. The Philistine lords had grown tired of patience. Achish arrived at her door with an ultimatum: deliver Samson's secret within 1 week or face the consequences. The threat was clear: silver or blood. But no more delays. That same evening, Samson returned to her house. He looked tired, older somehow, as if the weight of years had settled on his shoulders overnight. When she offered him wine, he declined. When she tried to embrace him, he stepped away. "You seem troubled," she said. "I am troubled." "About what?" "About you, about us, about what this is becoming." Her heart began to race. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I know you're not what you pretend to be. I know people are using you. I know you're caught between forces you can't control." The words hit her like physical blows. He knew somehow. He knew everything. "I don't understand what you're saying," she managed. "Don't you? Then let me be clearer. I know about your meetings with the Philistine lords. I know about the silver they've promised you. I know about the debts you're trying to pay." Delilah sank onto a cushion, her legs suddenly weak. "How?" "I'm not just strong, Delilah. I'm also experienced. I've survived 20 years of war by learning to read people, to see through lies, to spot traps before they close. Then why did you keep coming here? Why did you keep telling me things?" "Because I was hoping I was wrong. Because I wanted to believe you were different from all the others who tried to use me. I am different. Are you? Then why do you keep asking about my strength? Why do you keep trying to find my weakness?" The accusations poured out like water from a broken dam. Each one was true, and each one cut deeper than the last. Delilah felt tears streaming down her face, but she didn't know if they were from guilt or fear or something else entirely. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Then explain it to me." "I can't. It's too complicated. Try me." She looked at him, really looked at him. His face was stern but not cruel. His eyes held disappointment but also something else, hope maybe, or love. The realization that he might actually love her despite everything made her sob harder. "My father," she began, then stopped. "My father owed them money. When he died, the debt became mine. They found me 5 years ago, gave me this house, this life. But it all came with a price." "What price?" "Service. When they needed something done, I would do it. Information gathered, men seduced, secrets stolen. It was supposed to be a life of luxury, but it was really a life of slavery. And now they want my secret. They want you destroyed. They don't care how it happens as long as it happens soon. What did they threaten you with? Death. My father's death was not natural, Samson. They killed him when he couldn't pay. They'll kill me too if I don't deliver what they want." Samson was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentler. "So, you're trapped. Completely trapped. If I betray you, I lose the only good thing in my life. If I don't betray you, I lose my life entirely. What do you want to do? I want to run away with you. I want to disappear into the desert, or sail across the sea, or find someplace where neither of us has to be what we were born to be. That's not possible." "Why not?" "Because I'm the judge of Israel. I can't abandon my people. And because you're not the kind of woman who runs from problems." "How do you know what kind of woman I am?" "Because I've watched you for weeks. I've seen how you think, how you move, how you solve problems. You're not a runner, Delilah. You're a fighter. Then help me fight." "How?" "Tell me the truth. Give me the real secret of your strength. Let me have something genuine to bargain with." The request hung between them like a blade. Samson stared at her, and she could see the war raging behind his eyes. Trust warring with caution. Love fighting against experience. "If I tell you the truth," he said slowly, "will you use it against me?" "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I wish I could promise you safety, but I can't. All I can promise is that I'll try to find another way. That's not much of a guarantee. It's all I have." Days passed in terrible tension. Delilah could feel time running out like sand through an hourglass. The Philistine lords sent messages, subtle threats wrapped in polite language. Her servants reported strange men watching the house. The walls seemed to be closing in. Meanwhile, Samson continued his visits, but something had changed between them. The easy laughter was gone. The comfortable silences felt strained. They were both waiting for something to break. On the 6th night, Delilah finally cracked. Samson arrived to find her pacing like a caged animal, her face streaked with tears, her hair wild with frustration. "I can't do this anymore," she said without preamble. "Do what? Pretend, smile, act like everything is normal when my world is falling apart. What do you want from me? I want you to trust me completely or leave me completely. This halfway thing is killing me. Why? Because I love you." The words exploded from her like arrows from a bow. "I love you, and you don't trust me, and they're going to kill me if I don't deliver your secret, and I don't know what to do." Samson stepped back as if struck. "You love me?" "Yes, you fool. I love your strength and your gentleness and your terrible jokes and the way you look at the stars like they might tell you secrets. I love that you're trying to save a people who don't always appreciate you. I love that you're lonely and brave and completely impossible. Then why? Because love doesn't solve everything, because I'm still trapped, because loving you doesn't change the fact that they'll kill me if I don't betray you." She collapsed onto a cushion, sobbing with exhaustion and despair. "How can you say you love me when you won't trust me? How can you claim to care about me when you won't help me find a way out of this?" Samson knelt beside her, his face tortured. Because I've been betrayed before, because everyone who's ever claimed to love me has eventually sold me out, because trust is the hardest thing in the world for someone like me, someone like you, someone who knows that his strength makes him valuable, not lovable, someone who's learned that people want to possess his power, not cherish his heart. I'm not them. Aren't you? You're asking for the same thing they all asked for. My secret, my weakness, my vulnerability. I'm asking because I need it to survive, not because I want to destroy you. And if survival means my destruction, the question hung in the air like poison. Delilah looked at him through her tears, seeing the pain in his eyes, the terrible knowledge that love might not be enough to save either of them. I don't know, she whispered. God help me. I don't know. They held each other then, two people caught in a trap neither had set, but both had walked into. Outside the valley slept peacefully, unaware that the fate of nations might depend on the choice between love and survival. The deadline was tomorrow, and still neither of them knew what they would choose when the moment came. The confession. No razor has ever touched my head. The final night arrived like an executioner. Delilah had received her last message from the Philistine lords that morning. 3 phrases, scrawled in crimson ink. This night or not at all. Her day unfolded in a state of readiness, yet she remained uncertain what exactly she was readying herself for. Maybe death, maybe treachery, or perhaps some third possibility that had not yet shown its face. As twilight descended, she clothed herself entirely in white, a silken dress that gave her the appearance of a temple servant. Her hair she wove into uncomplicated plaids. Throughout the dwelling, she positioned candles, forming islands of amber glow within a sea of darkness. Samson appeared just as the sun met the edge of the world. His appearance was worn, as though sleep had eluded him for many nights. At the moment she pulled open the door, he remained motionless for an extended breath, examining her expression. Your appearance suggests you're clothed for a burial, his words came. Perhaps that's exactly what this is. Whose burial? I haven't determined that yet. Into the house he followed her, his movements those of someone approaching his fate. The dwelling had an altered quality this evening, filled with electric tension, weighted down with what might unfold. Each dark corner appeared to conceal mysteries. Each flicker from the candle flames hinted at motion. Upon cushions they settled together, yet made no contact. The space separating them felt vast as any sea. They arrived to visit me this day, Delilah spoke. The lords, you mean? Indeed. Their patience has ended, their warnings have concluded. Come tomorrow, either you become their captive or I become their victim. What did your response contain? Empty words. Yet empty words will no longer satisfy them. For an extended period, Samson remained quiet. His voice, when it emerged, rose barely louder than breath itself. Your earlier words about love and faith, I've been considering them. And I believe your assessment was accurate. Should I genuinely love you, complete faith should follow. And should I genuinely trust you, I ought to provide what you require to continue living. Delilah's pulse quickened its rhythm. What meaning do your words carry? My meaning is that weariness has overtaken me. Weariness with these games, weariness with deception, weariness with testing one another as adversaries rather than loving one another as, whatever our relationship might be. What exactly are we, Samson? The answer escapes me, though I'd welcome the opportunity to discover it. His reach extended, taking hold of her hands. Warmth resided in his calluses earned through fighting years, gentleness despite their power. Pose the question again, his instruction came. Which question? Regarding my power, concerning its genuine source, concerning the truth no person has heard from me. Moisture gathered within Delilah's vision. Your certainty exists? Certainty eludes me, yet I'll proceed regardless. Her breath drew in deeply. Reveal to me, Samson, the authentic mystery behind your power. The hair upon my head, simplicity marked his answer. No blade has ever made contact with it. Since the moment of my birth, my hair has held sacred meaning before God. While it continues uncut, my power continues. Should it face removal through shaving, my power would depart permanently. Each word struck her with physical force. This moment had arrived. The genuine secret, the undeniable truth. Everything necessary to unmake him had been placed in her possession. Your hair, her repetition came. 7 portions, never meeting any blade. Before my entry into the world, my mother received the messenger's declaration, "No cutting tool shall touch his head. The child shall exist as a Nazarite, dedicated to God from the time within the womb." Should someone perform the cutting during your sleep, my awakening would reveal weakness, ordinariness, merely another man facing capture, binding, death. Delilah's stare remained fixed on him, overwhelmed by the enormousness of his action. "Why does this revelation come from your lips? Your request was for me to select between love and wariness. Love receives my selection. Despite your knowledge of potential actions with this information, knowledge of possibilities exists. My hope rests in your actual choice, which involves discovering another path. Intelligence marks you, Delilah, sufficient intelligence to participate in their strategy without my destruction. Sufficient intelligence to preserve yourself without our sacrifice." Tears now flowed from her, streaming across her features like falling rain. "My hands now hold your existence. My heart holds your existence. A distinction separates the two. What if inadequate strength resides in my heart? What if fear claims victory? Then whatever arrives I'll confront, yet the confrontation will occur knowing complete faith was given to someone, knowing love reached depths permitting vulnerability. Samson, no. Additional questions will not fill this night. No additional mysteries, no additional barriers standing between us. Toward him he drew her, and against his chest she fell, releasing sobs mixing relief with terror. Their embrace continued as the candle flames diminished. Conversation filled the hours, dreams discussed, futures that might never materialize discussed, the concept of peace within a violence-constructed world discussed. For several hours, their pretense maintained them as simply a man alongside a woman experiencing love, absent destinies requiring fulfillment, absent debts demanding payment, absent enemies circling with wolf-like intent. Yet beyond the walls, watchers filled the night. Philistine warriors concealed among olive groves, servants whose loyalty silver had purchased, lords awaiting the signal that would shift the region's power equilibrium. Dawn's approach found Samson finally succumbing to sleep, his head resting within Delilah's lap. Downward, her gaze fell upon his features, peaceful within slumber, and her eyes followed the lines forming his face. Across her legs his hair lay spread like golden threads spun fine, each portion separate, each one containing power to overthrow kingdoms. Upon the table beside her position, the blade rested, its edge sufficient to slice through anything, prepared for employment. Before her now, the choice stood, unambiguous and conclusive: love or continued existence, faith or treachery. The man offering her everything, or the lords whose threat was her death, should she offer them nothing. Toward the blade her hand shifted, then halted, shifted once more, then withdrew. The conflict raging within her heart matched any combat Samson had ever engaged. Beyond the walls, initial birdsong commenced, greeting a dawn destined to alter everything. Within mere hours, betrayal would find someone. Capture would claim someone. Someone would learn the cost of faith within a world constructed on lies. Yet for this moment, within the final breath before the tempest, a man alongside a woman occupied space together in quietness, encircled by shadows and mysteries, grasping love while opportunity remained. The shearing of the most powerful man. Within Delilah's grasp, the blade quivered as though possessing life. Samson's sleep continued peacefully, his respiration deep and steady. His enormous form lay relaxed in absolute faith. Across her lap, his hair lay distributed like golden threads beneath candle glow. 7 portions, each possessing the thickness of cord, each grasping the power of armies. Hours had passed with her positioned this way, frozen between love and survival. Through the windows, initial pale suggestions of dawn showed themselves. Shortly, the Philistine lords would anticipate their response. Shortly, selection would become necessary. Her fingers followed the path of one portion, sensing the rough texture, the accumulated years' weight. Such commonplace hair, such exceptional power. That cutting it could alter anything appeared impossible, yet his power she had witnessed with her own vision. Should he state his power resided in his hair, then within his hair his power resided. "Love fills me for you," her whisper reached his sleeping form. "Understanding from you someday holds my hope." The blade possessed sharpness, recently refined. Through hair it would slice like fabric. Several swift cuts, and the world's most powerful man would transform into someone helpless as any infant. The blade received her lift. Her hands shaking grew so violent, dropping it nearly occurred. Down her face tears flowed, landing upon his hair like early moisture. Wrongness filled this. Every portion of her being released screams that wrongness filled this. Yet the alternative held death, not solely her death. Clarity had come from the lords that anyone offering her assistance would face death as well. Her servants, her companions, anyone demonstrating kindness toward her. Upon her hands, their blood would rest should refusal come from her. Thoughts arrived about her father. Death claimed for his obligations, about the years living as a slave dressed as royalty, about the silver coins capable of purchasing her freedom, or the blade that would terminate her life. Closer to his hair, the blade shifted. Slight stirring came from Samson, and her movement froze. Should waking occur now, should his sight capture her with the blade, what action would follow? Would her life end for the betrayal, or would simple departure occur, his faith and his love accompanying him? Back into sleep he settled, her name emerging as a murmur. The sound performed heartbreaking. Forgiveness. Her breath released, and toward his hair the knife descended. The initial portion separated with surprising facility. Thick golden strands descended to the floor like autumn foliage. Stirring did not come from Samson. His respiration maintained steadiness, peacefulness, absence of awareness. The second portion, the third, each severance felt like betrayal, like portions of her soul experiencing carving. Yet his hair maintained its falling, and his sleep maintained its undisturbed state. At the fourth portion, observation came of something shifting. The room's atmosphere felt altered, somehow weightier, less filled with power. The very air itself appeared to be transforming. The fifth portion, the sixth, his hair progressed toward shortness, his scalp gained more visibility. Shortly only one portion remained, the longest one, the one never experiencing cutting since birth. Delilah's pause occurred, the blade suspended above the final strand. This moment had arrived. Following this final portion's fall, return would become impossible. Helplessness would mark Samson, and betrayer status would mark her permanently. "Sorrow fills me," her whisper came, and the final cut received completion. The final portion descended to the floor with gentle whisper. Immediately, the change became tangible. The room's feeling turned empty, hollow, as though some immense presence had experienced sudden departure. The air ceased its humming with concealed energy. Even the candle glow appeared more dim. Perfect stillness marked Delilah, her breath held. Had success occurred? Had the world's most powerful man transformed into merely another man? Knowledge became necessary. With gentleness, with care, her position shifted, his head's movement from her lap to a cushion occurring. Stirring came, but waking did not. Standing occurred and backward movement, his face receiving her study for any indication of change. Identical appearance remained. The identical strong jaw, the identical broad shoulders, the identical massive form. Yet something beyond definition had altered. Ordinary appearance marked him, mortal appearance, vulnerable appearance. Samson, her soft call came. The Philistines have arrived upon you. Identical phrasing to their games with the bindings and cords marked this call. Each previous time, instant awakening had occurred, alertness and battle readiness present. This occasion brought slow, stirring grogginess, like any man experiencing awakening from profound sleep. What? Confusion thickened his mumbled voice. The Philistines, their presence is here. Upward sitting occurred, his gaze moving around the room with unclear vision. Then observation came of his hair distributed upon the floor. Observation came of the knife within her grasp. Observation came of truth inscribed upon her features. What action have you performed? His whisper arrived. The action necessity demanded. Upward, his reach extended, his scalp receiving touch, the short stubble sensation where his portions had existed. My hair. Sorrow fills me. Cutting occurred. Complete cutting occurred. Choice was absent from me. Standing occurred, slight swaying present. For a moment, collapse appeared possible. Then fury blazed within his eyes. Betrayal came from you. Self-preservation came through your destruction. Warning reached you. The information about their actions toward me without compliance reached you. And regardless, faith from me arrived. The pain carried by his voice exceeded any scream. Men releasing cries within agony had reached Delilah's ears. Warriors releasing weeps over fallen companions had received her observation, yet nothing compared to the sound Samson produced. A profound animal release of betrayal and loss. Beyond the walls, movement, reception occurred, footsteps, voices. The Philistine warriors shifting into position. Her signal had received their waiting, and closing in now occurred. Their arrival approaches, her words came. Permission for their arrival. Standing and door-facing occurred, his hands forming fists with clenching. Bare hands will serve for fighting them should necessity demand. Samson, refusal, understanding is absent from you. Your power. God provides my power, not hair. Toward the door his stride occurred, every measure the warrior he had perpetually been. Yet when lifting attempt came for the wooden bar securing the entrance, something terrible manifested. Nothing. The bar, which the previous day would have experienced, snapping like a small branch, might as well have held iron construction. Against it his straining occurred, his muscles showing bulging with effort, yet movement would not occur. The truth delivered impact to him like physical striking. Backward staggering occurred, his hands receiving his stare as though belonging to another person. Weakness marks me, his whisper came. Genuine weakness. Inward, the door burst with explosion. Philistine warriors flooded through the opening like water released. Battle preparation with the strongest living man had marked their arrival. Discovery instead came of a broken giant, releasing stares at his own hands in disbelief. His capture, the calling voice arrived from beyond. Achish, his triumph moment receiving savoring. Upon Samson they descended like wolves upon wounded prey. Fighting came from him, yet his strikes possessed no greater force than any ordinary man's. Numbers brought their overwhelming, his arms receiving binding with chains, his knees receiving forcing downward. The great judge belonging to Israel, Achish spoke, his stepping into the room occurring. Greatness proves absent. After all. Toward Delilah his gaze shifted, her position frozen against the wall, the knife maintaining presence within her grasp. Excellent performance. Your silver has received earning. A soldier produced a leather container and threw it toward her feet. Coins experience spilling across the floor. 1,100 pieces of silver from each among the 5 cities, the cost of the world's most powerful man. Toward the silver Delilah's stare directed, yet collection movement did not occur. The coins captured the candle glow, gleaming, resembling stars, beautiful and cold and somehow incorrect. His removal, Achish commanded. Toward the door they hauled Samson. During their passing of Delilah, toward her his gaze turned one final occasion. Anger held no presence within his eyes now, solely infinite sorrow. Love from me reached you. Quiet marking came. Actual love reached you. Knowledge exists. Her whispered return came. Love from me reached you as well. Then what reason exists? Because sufficiency was absent from love. Away they pulled him into the growing dawn. Delilah's listening occurred to the sounds marking his capture, the chain clanking, the soldiers' rough voices, the feet scraping upon stone. Then quietness. To the floor she descended, encirclement by distributed hair and silver coins occurring. The world's most powerful man had experienced departure. The Philistines' most dangerous adversary had experienced capture, and she, Delilah belonging to the valley of Sorach, had performed trade of love for continued existence. The candles experienced low burning, their flames performing dancing like spirits. Beyond, the sun experienced rising upon a transformed world. A world where Samson, the judge, existed as merely another captive, and she existed as the woman delivering his fall. Victory had arrived for her. Freedom had arrived. Wealth had arrived. Never within her life had emptiness felt more complete. The capture, vision removed and restraint applied. Celebration echoes filled the Philistine stronghold courtyard. Against the pre-dawn darkness, torches blazed. Around their prize, soldiers gathered in crowds, releasing shouts and laughter, resembling children with a fresh plaything. At the center positioning, Samson knelt within chains, his head experiencing bowing, his newly removed scalp releasing gleaming within the fire glow. Before him, Lord Achish positioned himself, the moment receiving savoring. 20 years of warfare, 20 years of humiliation. Defeats beyond counting at this single man's hands. And presently, finally, triumph. The mighty judge belonging to Israel, his speaking occurred with volume sufficient for all hearing, brought to lowness through a woman's blade. Cheering came from the soldiers. Spitting at Samson's feet came from some. Others performed poking with spear points, testing whether any portion of his legendary power maintained presence. Reaction did not come from him. Like a statue, his sitting occurred, toward the ground his staring, lost within the devastation marking his betrayal. Nothing for speaking, Achish performed taunting. No threats, no revenge promises. Such disappointment. Greater expectation existed for the man killing 1,000 among my people with a donkey's jaw. Continuation of nothing came from Samson. His quietness appeared to create nervousness among some soldiers. Battle with a giant had marked their arrival expectation. Discovery instead came of a broken man offering no resistance, no defiance, no spark belonging to his former fire. Perhaps planning something marks him. One captain's suggestion came. Perhaps another trick exists here. No trick, Achish spoke with confidence. Observation of him, genuine observation. The power has experienced departure. Vision of it exists in his eyes, empty, resembling dry wells. Truth marked this. Where formerly Samson's gaze had performed burning with divine fire, presently only hollow darkness existed. Appearance marked him like a man experiencing loss, not solely of strength, but of purpose, of identity, of his very soul. What action shall receive performance with him, my lord? The captain's asking came. Achish released, smiling and warmth held no presence within it. Example-making receives performance. World-showing receives performance regarding what manifestation occurs for those performing Philistine power defiance. Toward two soldiers carrying instruments releasing, wicked, gleaming within the torchlight, his gesture occurred. Bronze needles possessing thinness as reeds, possessing sharpness as serpent's fangs. His eyes, Achish's command came. His eyes receive, taking. Within the air, the words suspended like a death sentence. Even the celebrating soldiers experienced quietness, growth. Prisoner blinding held commonness absence, yet this feeling held difference. This marked a legend's destruction. Finally, upward looking came from Samson. The needles receiving his observation, something performed flickering within his expression. Not fear, but sorrow possessing such depth, earth itself appeared as its source. Will your dead receive return through this? Quiet marking came to his asking. No, Achish's admission came. Yet prevention receives creation for additional creation from you. Strength for anything's creation has experienced departure from me. Everything possessing matter has already received your taking, not everything. Your sight maintains your possession. Sky viewing maintains capability, sun viewing, people's faces viewing. Excessive mercy marks that for a man killing so many among mine, approach with their terrible tools came from the soldiers. Struggle did not come from Samson. Eye closing occurred and waiting occurred, for darkness never experiencing ending. Clean and swift the first needle's entry occurred. A sound performed escaping from his throat. Not quite scream qualification, not quite moan qualification, but something occupying space between them. The second needle's following occurred. Down his cheeks blood performed, running like fire tears. Completion's occurrence found Samson positioned blind and broken within the dust. Stepping back came from the soldiers. Their work's completion occurred. The man formerly observing eagles performing soaring within distant skies would never observe anything again. His chaining, Achish's ordering came. Bronze shackles upon his wrists and ankles, and heaviness making for them. Weight feeling with every step holds my desire. Binding came with chains possessing thickness as ship cables. Against his skin the bronze held coldness and weight, exceeding any burden ever experiencing carrying. Hauling to his feet occurred, swaying like a tree within a storm came. What location shall receive him? The captain's asking came. Gaza, the prison positioned there. Grain, grinding like a common slave, receives performance from him. People's observation receives permission regarding what transformation has occurred to their mighty judge. Walking forcing came, blind stumbling through streets beyond his viewing capability. Road lining came from people for watching, Philistines performing cheering, several Israelites performing weeping. The procession's movement occurred slowly, partially from Samson's blindness, partially from Hesh's desire for every humiliation moment savoring. During their walking through the land like wildfire, word distribution occurred. News carrying to every city, every village, every settlement within 100 miles came from runners. Samson the judge had experienced falling. Israel's strongest man existed as a prisoner. The age belonging to Philistine dominance had genuinely commenced. Within her house, positioned in the valley of Sorach, news reception from a breathless messenger came to Delilah. Listening within silence occurred, her face demonstrating nothing. Tale completion from him found her paying him a silver coin and sending occurrence. Alone once more, walking through rooms maintaining Samson's presence, scent occurred. His hair received positioning distributed upon the floor where dropping had occurred. Gathering occurred strand by strand, and holding to her face occurred. Olive oil and sunlight and wind across desert hills marked its scent. Weeping occurred then for the initial occasion since the betrayal, not from guilt. Choice-making had occurred, and living with it would occur, but from loss. Without his laughter, the house felt empty. Without his stories, the valley felt smaller. Without his impossible, beautiful power, the world felt colder. Beyond Gaza, grinding of metal upon stone marked the prison gates opening. Samson received pushing inside into a world belonging to shadows and despair. To a great millstone possessing size larger than any wheel, possessing weight heavier than any burden, chaining occurred. Pushing it within endless circles, grain grinding for his captor's bread would mark his job. Your new home receives welcoming. Laughter marked the guard speaking. Accommodation appreciation holds hoping. Nothing came from Samson. Feeling his way around the millstone until the pushing bar's discovery occurred. Then walking commencement occurred. Step by step, circle by circle, grain grinding within the darkness. Watching within amazement came from the other prisoners. This existed as Samson. This blind, broken man existed as their people's hero. Encouragement whispering came from some. Turning away within despair came from others. Their champion had experienced transformation into merely another slave. Yet something escaping their noticing existed. His hair experienced beginning to grow. Slowly, almost beyond perception, the stubble upon his scalp experienced lengthening. Day by day, week by week, the portions grasping his power experienced returning. The Philistines had performed one crucial mistake. Samson's strength destruction marked a one-time event within their thinking. Hair cutting marked a permanent solution within their thinking. Wrongness marked them. Within the prison's darkness, during his pushing the millstone within endless circles, prayer commencement came from Samson. Not for rescue, not for revenge, but for one additional chance, one final opportunity for serving the God providing him strength, for striking a blow for the people calling him judge. Like incense from the grinding floor, his prayers ascended, and slowly, inexorably, his hair commenced growing. Samson within chains, grinding within Gaza. Upon his wrists, the bronze shackles possess heaviness. Through the prison walls belonging to Gaza, each step releases, echoing. The man formerly carrying city gates presently experiences stumbling within darkness. Stone and shadow have transformed into his world. Each morning, to the grinding mill the guards perform his leading. Round and round walking occurs, the massive stone wheel performing grain crushing into flour receiving his turning. The very hands formerly performing lion tearing apart presently perform grain pushing for his captor's bread. Within the dusty air the irony possesses bitter taste. Children perform, gathering for the blind giant's work watching. Pebbles receive throwing and laughter occurs when flinching comes from him. Their mothers perform, pulling them back, warnings about the monster killing thousands receiving whispering. Yet curiosity achieves victory. Returning for staring perpetually occurs. His hair commences growing slowly, like hope performing, returning to a broken heart. Initial noticing absence comes from the guards. What reason would exist? Hair appears harmless presently. Stumbling has received their observation. Weeping within the night has received their hearing. This broken man creates no threat. The Philistine lords perform visiting sometimes. Gloating arrival occurs, their greatest enemy's reduction to an animal receiving observation. Speaking occurs as though hearing capability holds absence from him, as though blindness has performed stealing his other senses as well. Their victories, their expanding territories, their plans for permanent rule receive discussion. Listening occurs, remembering occurs, waiting occurs. The mill experiences transformation into his world. 10 steps forward, turning 10 steps back. The rhythm never experiences changing. Within the stone floor, his feet perform wearing grooves. From the endless pushing his shoulders, experience growing stronger. His body performs adapting, yet his spirit performs burning with quiet fury. Some days God's presence feels like a whisper within the wind. Other days, silence performs, stretching endless as his darkened world. Prayer occurs regardless, not for strength or revenge, but for purpose, for one final chance for mattering. The guards experience growing careless. Wine drinking occurs while his working occurs. Dice gambling occurs, and close watching of him experiences forgetting. What reason exists? Where can blind man running occur? What damage capability exists without his legendary power? His hair experiences growing longer, his neck feels stronger. Small signs, yet everything receives his noticing presently. Touch has experienced transformation into his new sight. Stories receive telling to him from sound. Visitor approach receives warning from sandal scraping. Guard number near standing receives telling from weapon clinking. Fellow prisoners perform whispering his name with reverence and pity. Some perform remembering when Israel fighting came from him. Others possess knowledge of him solely as the fool trusting the wrong woman. Truth marks both stories. Deep cutting marks both. From the grinding stone, his hands experience growing calloused. From the endless walking, his back experiences aching. Yet something else experiences growing as well. Patience. The wild young man performing, acting upon every impulse, has experienced learning to wait, to think, to plan. The Philistines perform, celebrating their victory daily. Within Gaza's streets, wine performs, flowing freely. From their temples, music performs, echoing. Israel's judge has received their capture. Their god Dion has performed, proving stronger than the Hebrew god, or belief of this marks them. Of Delilah, thinking occurs sometimes, not with rage anymore, but with something approaching, understanding closer. Choice-making came from her. Choice-making came from him. Both performed, leading here, to this grinding mill, to this darkness, to this strange peace arriving before the storm. His shoulders receive, reaching from his hair presently, still short by his old standards, yet growing. Each strand performs, carrying the memory belonging to his vow, the promise receiving, making before his birth, the covenant experiencing his breaking, and yet possibly honoring again. The mill performs, turning. The grain experiences transformation into flour. The strong man experiences growing stronger within ways beyond his captor's viewing capability. And within his prison's darkness, waiting for God's remembering of him, occurs from Samson, Delilah's aftermath, wealth, and quietness. From the story, like smoke and wind, her disappearing occurs. One moment, history's greatest betrayal's center marks her standing. The next moment, departure has occurred, vanishing into the gaps between verses, solely questions and theories remaining behind. Did silver collection occur? 5,500 pieces releasing, gleaming within the torchlight. Sufficient wealth for estates purchasing, servants, a lifetime belonging to comfort. The Philistine lords existed as men possessing their word when business involvement occurred. Her cooperation held their requirement, and better than threats, payment performs, sealing loyalty. Immediate fleeing marks. Some imaginings of her. Reward grabbing and running before blame, possibility for what followed next. Smart women possess knowledge regarding disappearing timing. Giants' betrayers' understanding exists that safety rarely maintains long duration among the giant's people. Staying marks, others picturing of her, shadow watching as Samson's dragging away occurred. Did triumph feeling occur, relief, or did something perform, twisting within her chest when blood observation came running from his ruined eyes? No comfort for our curiosity comes from the biblical text offering. From the narrative, her name simply experiences dropping. Ancient text writers possessed little caring for what manifestation occurred to supporting players following their role's completion. Forward movement marks history, behind get left characters. Yet, volume speaking marks her silence. Within any record, her appearing again never occurs. No marriage announcements, no property purchases, no diplomatic missions for her Philistine masters. As though the earth performed, swallowing her whole, the moment Samson's hair contacted the floor. Perhaps merchant ship passage received her purchasing. Wide and welcoming for those possessing sufficient gold, the Mediterranean performed, stretching. Egypt held need for skilled workers. Babylon performed, welcoming clever foreigners. Cyprus offered past isolation. A woman possessing her particular talents could perform, prospering anywhere. Foolish decisions about love and her intelligence existed as famous already. Or maybe, closer to home, staying occurred, yet everything about herself experienced changing. New name, new clothes, new story. Transformation into a merchant's widow from Ashdod occurs for the woman bringing down Samson, a weaver from Gath. A priestess performing service for some minor goddess within a forgettable temple. Storytelling comes from the silver itself. 5,500 pieces would perform, possessing weight nearly 200 pounds. Not the kind possessing wealth you perform stuffing within a travel bag. Carts would hold her need. Guards, careful planning. Moving that quantity of metal signified track leaving, yet track remaining holds absence. Never living at all marks some scholars' suggestion of her. Later invention marked Delilah, a symbol rather than a person. The seductive foreign woman performing leading good men astray. This story holds every culture's need. Every generation performs telling it again with different names. Yet, too real for pure invention, feel the details. The question-asking way of hers, the patience demonstration, the specific silver pieces number. Fiction performs tending toward round numbers and simple motivations. Odd amounts and complex choices mark real life's dealing. Languishing or delicate within Hebrew marks her name's meaning. Fitting for a woman performing weakening the strongest living man. Yet choosing capability, changing capability, forgetting capability, mark names. What birth calling came from parents might have experienced vanishing with everything else. Did children possess her? A family performing, counting upon her success? From love for people never meeting us, did this betrayal experience birth? Many mouths could receive feeding from the money, many dowries providing, many futures securing. Perhaps one man's sacrifice for dozens of others, saving, came from her. Or already part marking the Philistine intelligence network existed, a professional spy performing target seduction for information. Her most famous assignment just happened as Samson. Within this version, theater always marked the romance. Calculation marked the tears. Lying from the first touch marked the love. Later centuries rabbis performed creating elaborate stories regarding her fate. Temple collapse. Death, crushing alongside Samson and his other victims, marked some saying. Old age living, nightmares haunting, and her choices weight marked others claiming. Justice the original story lacks, all these tales perform seeking to provide. Yet perhaps the point marks her disappearing. Mystery suits her role within the larger story, mystery marking her remaining. Transformation into every temptation, every betrayal, every moment when love and loyalty perform, clashing with survival and self-interest, occurs for her. From history's judgment, freedom received her purchasing from the silver. Within vanishing so completely, something rare among biblical characters received her achieving. Definition escaping occurred for her. Single interpretation or fate pinning down received her refusing. Delilah's silence performs, continuing to speak. Louder than presence might have, her absence performs echoing. And within the space where her ending should position itself, their own version of justice, mercy, or understanding receives every reader's writing. The feast, belonging to Dion, the Philistines' triumph. From Gaza's heart like a carved stone mountain, the great temple belonging to Dion performs rising. Toward heaven its pillars perform stretching, thick as ancient trees, strong as the earth itself. This day, 3,000 Philistines perform, packing its halls for their greatest victories celebrating. With voices, music, and roasted meat scent, the air performs thrumming. From golden cups, wine performs flowing. Between the crowds carrying platters containing bread, figs, and honey cakes, servants perform weaving. Between adult legs, children perform darting, their laughter performing mixing with deeper voices elevated within song. Beyond a festival, this marks vindication belonging to everything the Philistines perform, believing about power, gods, and destiny. The 5 lords belonging to the Philistine cities perform sitting upon raised platforms, torch light catching their finest robes. Their necks receive circling from gold chains. Upon their fingers, silver rings perform flashing. These exist as the men performing ordering Delilah's mission, performing, paying her price, presently performing, reaping the rewards belonging to patient planning and cold strategy. The temple's heart receives domination from Dion's statue. Half man, half fish, carving from black stone and precious metals inlaying. At his feet, incense performs burning. Thanksgiving prayers within the ancient tongue receive priest chanting. Their God has performed, proving himself stronger than the Hebrew deity. Grain within the prison below performs grinding from the evidence. Musicians perform playing harps, flutes, and drums. Between the pillars, dancers perform spinning. Samson's capture story receiving their movements telling. One performer performs playing the mighty judge, flexing and posturing. Delilah receives another's portraying all graceful gestures and knowing smiles. Haircutting receiving her miming, the crowd performs roaring approval. 3 days already has marked the celebrations lasting. Each dawn performs, bringing new visitors from outlying towns. Temple viewing, where their enemy will receive, displaying marks their arrival. Wine drinking within honor of their God's triumph, safe feeling for the initial time within 20 years. Through the crowd like ripples within water, stories perform spreading, larger with each telling, tales belonging to Samson's legendary strength, perform growing. The man killing 1,000 warriors, carrying city gates, setting fields ablaze with foxes and torches. Even greater, their victory appearing becomes through invincible sounding making. Children never observing him perform, imagining a monster 10 feet tall, possessing claws for hands. Adults performing, remembering his raids, perform speaking within hushed tones regarding the day. Divine wrath, made flesh, marked his appearing. Agreement exists among all that their superiority over Israel's scattered tribes receives proving through capturing him. The priests perform, declaring this the greatest victory within Philistine history, greater than their coastal cities' conquest, more significant than their ironwork mastery. Spiritual triumph marks this. Proof that Dion performs watching over his people and into their hands, their enemies delivering. Outside the temple, merchants perform hawking souvenirs. Samson within chains clay figures, scissors miniature commemorating his downfall, Delilah's clever betrayal storytelling scrolls. Even defeat experiences transformation into commerce when this sweet victory tasting marks. The mood performs growing more festive as evening performing approaching. The star attractions bringing out receives someone's suggestion. The chant receives the crowds taking up. Samson's bringing out the fallen giant's viewing reception. The blind judge belonging to Israel's showing. Glances receive the Lord's exchanging. The festival's climax, saving for this moment, had marked their planning. Yet, entertainment receives the people's demanding. Their inhibitions have received loosening from wine. With their own eyes, their conquered enemy's observation holds their desire. Mocking him, powerful feeling within his presence. Guards receive summoning. Orders receive giving. Quiet with anticipation, experiences the crowd growing. Even playing stopping comes from the musicians. 3,000 people perform, holding their breath, the man haunting their dreams for 2 decades observation, waiting. At the temple's rear, the great doors perform swinging open. Into the corridor beyond, torchlight performs spilling. Upon stone floors, footsteps perform echoing. Someone's coming marks, someone's being brought marks. The moment receiving all their waiting approaches arriving about. Just as sun-setting commencement, the celebration reaches its peak. Through the temple's windows, golden light performs streaming, warm hues painting everything. The perfect lighting for the perfect moment. Down to the smallest detail, their triumph has received the Philistines arranging. Within the flickering light, Dion's statue appears smiling. Over his people's greatest hour, the god belonging to grain and sea performs watching. The final humiliation belonging to Israel's champion will receive witnessing from the temple protecting his people for centuries. Slower tastes, sweeter when savoring victory. Forward the crowd performs pressing, their first glimpse eagerness marking for the legend made flesh. A broken animal observation holds their expecting, a shell belonging to former strength. Something else entirely marks what receiving occurs, something changing everything within ways beyond their imagining capability. The final prayer, remembering me solely once more. Like a prize bull brought for sacrifice between the pillars his leading occurs. Smooth stone, worn by countless worshippers, receives his bare feet's feeling. The carved walls receive his fingers tracing as forward guiding comes from guards. Every step performs, taking him deeper into his enemy's power's heart. Initial hitting from the noise comes. 3,000 voices performing, creating a sound wall, appearing pushing against his chest. Laughter, jeers, conversations, music, all performing, blending into one great celebration, roar. Observation of him, mocking him, safe feeling within his presence marks their arrival. Something receives someone's throwing, his shoulders striking. Fruit maybe, or bread. Suit following comes from others. Small objects pelting his body rain, while the crowd performs shrieking with delight. Flinching and stumbling marks the blind giant. Their former terror has experienced transformation into their entertainment. Observation of him now. Voices perform, calling out. Where exists your strength, son belonging to Manoah? From our chains, can your God perform saving you? For us, mighty judge, dancing perform. From every direction the taunts arrive. Face observation capability holds absence, yet joy within his suffering receives his hearing. Between two massive pillars at the temple center, the guards perform his positioning. Steadying himself, his hands naturally perform, reaching out. From the pressing of bodies and burning torches, the stone feels warm. These pillars perform, holding up the roof over the main hall. Tons of carved stone and timber's weight receives their bearing. Over the smooth surfaces his palms perform running. With careful fingers the decorative carvings receive tracing. With his outstretched arms their thickness receives measuring. The builder within him, years of construction, work training, commences understanding what touching receives. For us, perform, someone performs shouting. The demand receives others taking up. His strength showing, iron bars bending or heavy stones lifting, holds their desire. Understanding absence exists, that never from his muscles alone his power arrived. From his covenant, his vow, his uncut hair arrival came. Close leaning comes from a young guard, low speaking so others hearing cannot occur. Showing holds their desire, old man. Something give them, or worse, getting will occur. Almost kindness within his voice exists. Perhaps his own children possess him. Perhaps remembering occurs when Samson's name fearing marked him. Yet barely hearing him marks Samson. Inward his attention performs, turning toward a conversation possessing more importance than any earthly voice. Silently his lips perform moving, words forming meant for ears hearing beyond human perception. Words rising above the temple's noise toward the God formerly making him strong. Sovereign Lord, his whisper comes, within the crowd's roar his voice losing, remembering me perform. From depths deeper than his ruined eyes the prayer arrives. From places where strength experienced birth and hope continues flickering like dying flame. His hair has experienced growing, not to its former length, yet enough. Sufficient for the vows, meaning something again. Sufficient for the covenant's weight-holding, sufficient for one final miracle should God continue listening to broken promises and desperate pleases. Please God, continuation comes, against the cold stone his forehead pressing. Solely once more, strengthening me perform. Simple, clean, free from pride or grand plans, marks the request. Not for victory or vindication asking occurs, but for power for ending what commencement received. More restless the crowd experiences growing. Action, spectacle, proof belonging to their dominance over Israel's champion holds their desire. Hot coals, bringing for dancing making, receive someone's suggestion. Chains and whips receive others proposing. A darker tone receives the celebrations taking, as wine and mob mentality perform merging. Under his hands, the pillars receive Samson's feeling. Their crucial role within, holding up the massive roof, receives sensing. With builder's instinct, how much force would hold need for shifting them from their foundations, receives understanding. Simple marks the math, clear mark the physics, absolute mark the consequences. Dying with the Philistines perform me letting, to his prayer his adding comes. No anger, no hatred carries the words, solely tired resolution. As a fool living has occurred, as a fool loving has occurred, as a fool trusting has occurred. Perhaps as something better, dying capability exists, something useful, something final. Tensing occurs from his muscles, not with human strength, but with something flowing from beyond human limits. The same power formerly helping him perform, tearing apart lions and carrying city gates, presently fills him one final time. Gift and curse, blessing and weapon, all receiving wrapping within the simple prayer belonging to a broken man. Blood receives the crowd's calling. Nervousness experiences the guards growing. More violent orders receive the Lord's preparing to give. The blind man's hair, stirring within windless air, receives none's noticing. The way stone dust commences, falling from ancient mortar joints, receives none's observing. Against the pillars his full weight receives Samson's placing. Their resistance receives testing. Slightly giving under pressure that should not perform, moving them at all receives feeling. Hearing has occurred from God. Answering has occurred from God. One final miracle for one final prayer. Without knowing why its breath receives the temple's holding. For a moment even the loudest voices appear quieting, as though sensing that something important approaches changing the building itself. Something altering the balance of power between gods and men, between pride and judgment, between the living and the dead. The collapse, the hero, and the Lord's death. With sounds like thunder, the pillars perform cracking. As mortar joints, ancient and weathered, commence failing under impossible pressure, stone dust performs raining down. Within the groaning belonging to limestone and the failing timber shriek, Samson's final prayer receives its answer. For a heartbeat. The show's part marking this marks the crowd's thinking. Against stone pillars, the blind giant pressing as though moving capability could exist. Laughing marks children. Pointing and jeering mark adults. For further self-humiliation room, giving marks the guards, stepping back. Then shifting comes from the first pillar. Low, like distant thunder, the sound performs starting, then building to a roar, drowning out 3,000 voices. From the ceiling, stone chunks perform falling. Within confusion, people perform looking upward, then growing alarm. The temple belonging to Dion, centuries marking its standing, commences dying. Into the task his full weight receives Samson's throwing. Against stone every muscle performing, straining. Like fire within his veins, the power flowing through him performs burning. Not his youth's wild strength, but something focused, purposeful, final marks this. Around his face as forces beyond nature perform working through his mortal frame. His hair performs whipping. The second pillar performs cracking. Through the crowd like spilled oil catching flame, panic performs spreading. 3,000 people suddenly perform, understanding that upon the pillars the blind man experiences destroying, the roof above their heads performs depending. Laughter receives replacing from screams. Triumph celebration experiences transformation into terror stampede. The triumph festival performs turning into a trap when tons of stone commence falling, yet running nowhere exists. The temple's design, perfect for ceremony, experiences transformation into a trap when tons of stone commence falling. Against locked doors and blocked exits, people perform crushing. Mothers are separated from their children amid the crush of panicking bodies. Powerful men step over the vulnerable in frantic bids for survival. The Philistine rulers, elevated on their viewing platforms, witness death advancing toward them with absolute clarity. These same lords who orchestrated Delilah's deception, who financed Samson's imprisonment, who constructed their entire festival around his public degradation, now observe their triumph transforming into catastrophe. Some cry out for their personal guards. Others offer prayers to Dagon. All comprehend far too late that they have miscalculated their adversary's capacity one last time. Enormous support beams, each carved from age-old cedar trees, shatter like brittle sticks as the ceiling loses its foundation. Stone blocks that required scores of workers to position plummet downward with devastating certainty. The sacred building that consumed generations to construct perishes within moments, claiming its congregation in the destruction. Samson senses the structure crumbling around him, yet maintains his stance. His power does not diminish until his purpose is fulfilled. The twin pillars surrender simultaneously, and the temple's entire central section plummets in one catastrophic moment. The impact reverberates through Gaza like divine judgment given voice. Choking dust billows upward, transforming daylight into premature dusk. The atmosphere fills with screams of the wounded and perishing. The handful who manage to flee stumble onto the streets drenched in blood and powdered stone, their expressions vacant with trauma. The magnificent temple of Dagon has transformed into a mass grave for its worshippers. The 5 Philistine lords perish as one, pulverized beneath the very platform that once positioned them above ordinary citizens. Their golden chains and silver ornaments offer no protection against descending stone. Their authority expires in the identical instant as their final breath. The men who governed the coastal territories for decades become merely additional corpses buried in the wreckage. Recovery operations commence without delay, but the devastation proves too comprehensive. Those who survived frantically excavate through the destruction, shouting the names of missing family members. A small number respond from within the ruins. The majority remain eternally quiet. The gathering of 3,000 transforms into a mass burial for thousands. Samson's remains rest at the epicenter of the ruin, still braced between the shattered pillars. His end arrived swiftly as the roof came down. No more grinding at the mill, no more shackles, no more sightlessness or humiliation. His ultimate supplication has received complete fulfillment. The mathematical exactness of his vengeance becomes apparent as rescuers tally the casualties. The Philistines who perished in the temple's destruction outnumber those who fell by his hand throughout 20 years, serving as judge. His death achieved what his lifetime could not. A strike so catastrophic that Philistine authority never completely recovers. Information travels rapidly throughout the territory. Israel's fallen warrior has delivered one final blow. Dagon's temple lies in complete devastation. The lords, who appeared invulnerable, have become dust. The population who felt secure, ridiculing a shackled titan, have discovered the ultimate price of arrogance. Some describe it as divine intervention. Others characterize it as calamity. The reality encompasses both perspectives. Samson's might returned precisely long enough to accomplish his bleakest intention. The individual who existed as an enigma perished as a resolution to inquiries concerning justice, retribution, and the consequences of underestimating those with nothing remaining to forfeit. The sun descends over Gaza as recovery operations persist throughout the darkness. Flames dance among the devastation where torches previously illuminated festivities. The grand celebration of Dagon has concluded. The era of Philistine supremacy begins its extended decline. And somewhere within the debris, a sightless man's closing prayer resonates through the stillness of fulfilled justice. Myth or historical record? How did the narrative endure? The initial storytellers were likely those who survived. Individuals who experienced Samson's attacks, who observed the temple's destruction, who possessed memories too significant for erasure. They shared the accounts around evening fires, within marketplace stalls, wherever communities assembled to comprehend events that appeared beyond ordinary human scope. Each recounting altered the narrative incrementally. Specifics transformed like wind-blown sand. Numerical figures expanded or contracted based on the narrator's objective. What persisted unchanged was the fundamental reality, an individual of extraordinary might, brought down through a woman's treachery, who perished while annihilating his adversary's holy site. The Hebrew narrators confronted a dilemma. How do you safeguard the legacy of a champion who was simultaneously a simpleton, a magistrate who violated his own principles, a defender who ended his life through self-destruction, eliminating thousands of innocent people alongside him? The resolution existed in nuance. They declined to portray Samson as entirely virtuous or completely wicked. Spoken tradition transmitted the account across generations before written documentation emerged. Expert narrators, the preservers of collective memory, committed to memory not merely the incidents, but the precise language employed to convey them. Their instruction emphasized exactitude. Sacred narratives demanded flawless transmission. When scribes eventually documented the account, they implemented selections that continue puzzling researchers. Why dedicate substantial space to Delilah's manipulation? Why incorporate the puzzle regarding the lion and sweet substance? Why maintain Samson's closing prayer verbatim? Each element survived for purposes we can merely speculate. The narrative fulfilled various functions for ancient Israel. It clarified Philistine vulnerability following centuries of control. It cautioned against intermingling with foreign populations. It demonstrated God operating even through imperfect champions. It established that might, without discernment, results in devastation. Various communities accentuated different facets. Military men concentrated on Samson's combat capabilities. Religious leaders emphasized his violated commitments and their ramifications. Women's gatherings analyzed Delilah's reasoning and decisions. Each assembly discovered their personal significance in the ancient language. The account traversed cultural divisions early. Philistine survivors maintained their separate rendition, likely depicting Samson as an extremist and Delilah as a nationalistic champion. Egyptian record-keepers referenced a Hebrew strongman who demolished a temple. Even remote peoples heard fragments of the narrative through commercial pathways and political exchanges. Jewish religious scholars from subsequent centuries elaborated the account with intricate analysis. They provided Delilah comprehensive origin stories, invented dialogues between Samson and the divine, clarified every seeming inconsistency with meticulous reasoning. Their contributions integrated into the tradition successive interpretive layers, constructing upon the foundational narrative. Christian theologians perceived Samson as an imperfect foreshadowing of Christ. Both received angelic announcements. Both struggled for their people's liberation. Both perished to vanquish their adversaries. The similarities proved too conspicuous to disregard, though they demanded imaginative interpretation to function entirely. Islamic tradition incorporated Samson among the prophets, though his narrative received alternative emphasis. His power originated from conviction, not hair. His destruction resulted from hubris, not betrayal. Cultural principles influenced how each faith community recalled the ancient magistrate. Archaeological findings validate certain elements while leaving others enigmatic. Philistine temples featuring central support columns have been excavated. Iron armaments from the corresponding period occupy museum displays. Grinding mechanisms matching scriptural descriptions continue appearing in ancient locations. The material world confirms the narrative's environment, but archaeology remains silent regarding specific individuals. No carved inscription references Samson by designation. No sculpture captures Delilah's features. No official chronicle acknowledges losing thousands in a temple disaster. The powerful seldom record their most mortifying failures. Medieval documents preserve the text through successive duplication. Monastery monks, synagogue scribes, library scholars all participated in maintaining the narrative's survival. Each reproduction risked introducing mistakes, but simultaneously guaranteed preservation through multiplicity. The printing press's creation rendered the narrative accessible to common individuals for the first time. No longer reliant upon clergy or academics for access, everyday readers could develop their personal perspectives about Samson and Delilah. This text democratization ignited fresh interpretations and discussions. Contemporary scholarship implements historical examination to distinguish legend from factual events. Linguistic evaluation uncovers when various sections received written form. Comparative mythology demonstrates how the narrative connects to analogous accounts from different cultures. Archaeological chronology supplies historical framework. Nevertheless, the narrative's impact surpasses scholarly evaluation. It addresses something universal regarding human character: the conflict between might and fragility, the intricacy of affection and treachery, the manner personal imperfections can demolish public champions. These subjects remain equally pertinent presently as they existed 3 millennia past. The account survived because it communicates reality about the human experience. Not necessarily historical accuracy, but emotional and spiritual authenticity. It encompasses how we grapple with authority, enticement, faithfulness, and mortality. These conflicts outlive empires and cultural epochs. Delilah, in artistic representation, the muse of treachery. Renaissance artists encountered Delilah like miners discovering precious ore. Here existed a scriptural narrative containing everything their sponsors craved: aesthetic appeal, conflict, foreign locations, and sufficient exposed flesh to gratify without transgressing into impropriety. The woman who seduced Samson became their preferred subject for investigating temptation, authority, and the perilous attraction of prohibited affection. Artemisia Gentileschi rendered her with perceptive eyes and deliberate hands. The shears gleam in flickering light as Delilah severs Samson's might strand by strand. Yet Artemisia's Delilah exhibits internal struggle, not malice. Her countenance mirrors the burden of unavoidable betrayal. Here stands a woman executing an impossible selection, not a simplistic antagonist reveling in destruction. Rubens favored spectacle over refinement. His Delilah materializes as absolute enticement, all-rounded forms and aureate hair. Samson rests like an unsuspecting infant while she gestures toward concealed warriors. The arrangement screams peril, yet the slumbering titan perceives nothing. Rubens illustrated desire overwhelming prudence, beauty conquering might. Dutch craftsmen discovered alternative meanings in the account. Rembrandt's interpretations concentrate on illumination and obscurity, revealing moral intricacy through artistic methodology. His Delilah surfaces from shadows, neither absolutely malevolent nor completely blameless. The chiaroscuro technique reflects the narrative's ethical uncertainty. Reality exists somewhere between luminosity and darkness. The Baroque era embraced Delilah's dramatic qualities. Caravaggio's followers illustrated her as a performer on history's platform, executing betrayal through theatrical movements and billowing garments. Their compositions capture the revelation moment, when concealed reality finally emerges into visibility. Every application of color advances the narrative suspense. Neoclassical creators preferred moral precision over emotional complexity. Their Delilah embodies corruption, contaminating virtue, foreign allure, destroying domestic fortitude. These illustrations functioned as admonitions about the perils of combining with alternative cultures, alternative principles, alternative allegiances. Visual art transformed into messaging, disguised as beauty. The Romantic movement restored Delilah's humanity. Their illustrations present a woman divided between affection and obligation, longing and continuation. Romantic Delilah endures her selections instead of celebrating them. She transforms into a tragic character rather than simple seductress, casualty of situations exceeding personal volition. Photography introduced fresh capabilities for rendering the ancient narrative. Victorian photographers arranged elaborate presentations with subjects in scriptural attire. Their representations targeted historical precision, but disclosed contemporary perspectives about gender, authority, and ethics. Even documentary photography transported cultural assumptions. Hollywood grasped Delilah's narrative enthusiastically. Silent cinema presented her as a vamp, the hazardous woman who annihilates powerful men through sexual control. Hedy Lamarr personified this interpretation in the 1949 spectacular, all smoky expressions and exposing wardrobe. Cinema converted her into an archetype of feminine peril. Contemporary filmmakers wrestle with the narrative's troublesome components. How do you present Delilah without strengthening damaging generalizations about women? Certain films render her an operative with honorable intentions. Others depict her as authentically caring for Samson, but ensnared by situations. All attempt to complicate the elementary formula of woman equaling betrayal. Television discovered the narrative ideal for extended series format. The structure permits duration to develop both personalities thoroughly, investigating the connection beyond the betrayal instant. Contemporary productions frequently provide Delilah her separate narrative progression, complete with origin tale, reasoning, and independence beyond her function in Samson's destruction. Opera creators appreciate the dramatic potential. Saint-Saëns composed Samson and Delilah with musical pieces capturing both characters' emotional intricacy. Delilah's seduction melody becomes a composition of musical control, while Samson's closing supplication achieves heights of tragic dignity. Musical composition adds dimensions that language alone cannot accomplish. Contemporary creators discover fresh perspectives on the ancient account. Feminist artists reconceptualize Delilah as a woman battling for continuation in a male-dominated reality. Her betrayal transforms into an act of defiance rather than mere avarice. These creations pose uncomfortable inquiries about whose narrative we communicate and for what purpose. Sculpture presents distinctive obstacles when rendering Delilah. How do you capture betrayal in carved stone? How do you display psychological complexity in cast metal? The finest sculptures emphasize motion and countenance, discovering methods to indicate internal conflict through external shape. Stone transforms into visible psychology. Comic publications and illustrated narratives embrace the narrative's visual spectacle. Creators can present Samson's impossible might and Delilah's refined manipulation with equivalent proficiency. The medium permits intimate character instances and grand action progressions within identical storytelling. Sequential illustration serves the narrative's dual character flawlessly. Digital creation unveils fresh capabilities for rendering scriptural personalities. Computer imagery can present Samson's power with unprecedented authenticity while capturing Delilah's emotional intricacy through refined facial movement. Technology serves ancient narration in methods previous eras could never conceive. Fashion creators extract inspiration from Delilah's representation across cultures and centuries. Her wardrobe embodies seduction, authority, and cultural foreignness combined into fabric and adornment. Fashion presentations become enactments of the scriptural account, with subjects embodying various interpretations of the legendary temptress. Children's publication illustrators confront the obstacle of rendering an adult narrative suitable for young readers. Their Delilah becomes a warning character about the significance of maintaining commitments and selecting companions prudently. The betrayal receives softening, yet moral instruction remains preserved through deliberate artistic interpretation. Contemporary installation creators construct immersive encounters around the Samson and Delilah narrative. Observers navigate through reconstructed environments, experiencing the account from various viewpoints. These creations challenge conventional concepts of champion and antagonist by compelling audiences to literally perceive the narrative from alternative positions. The representation of Delilah continues transforming as each generation discovers fresh meanings in her ancient narrative. She persists as art's preferred scriptural temptress, yet contemporary interpretations disclose her intricacy rather than diminishing her to elementary generalization. The woman who defeated a titan continues motivating creators to investigate the eternal subjects of affection, betrayal, and the cost of continuation. Feminist recovery. Delilah re-examined. The narrative has been communicated by men for men concerning men across 3 millennia. Delilah materializes as secondary character in Samson's spectacle, defined exclusively by her connection to the male champion. But what transpires when women reclaim the account? When they pose alternative inquiries about reasoning, independence, and continuation, examine her reality through female perspective. The Bronze Age presented limited alternatives for women lacking male safeguarding. Delilah existed among the Philistines, potentially as a foreigner herself. Her continuation depended on shrewdness, aesthetic appeal, and the capacity to traverse hazardous political circumstances. Autonomy demanded meticulous evaluation of peril and compensation. The text never designates her a prostitute, despite centuries of presumption. She possesses her dwelling, manages her assets, and bargains directly with influential men. These elements indicate a woman of certain position, not a desperate casualty selling her physical form for continuation. Her independence challenges elementary accounts about scriptural women as inactive objects. Contemporary feminist researchers inquire, what if her betrayal possessed justification? Samson had consumed 20 years, terrorizing her population. He incinerated agriculture, annihilated possessions, and eliminated thousands in personal vendettas, masked as divine assignments. From Philistine viewpoint, he constituted a terrorist, not a champion. Delilah's conduct might represent nationalistic obligation rather than personal treachery. The seduction itself becomes more intricate under feminist examination. Who genuinely dominated the connection? Samson visited her repeatedly, perpetually returning despite conspicuous peril. She posed direct inquiries about his vulnerability. He selected to respond. Eventually. Perhaps she was not master controller, but merely persistent questioner managing a presumptuous man. Her emotional control receives alternative interpretation through feminist perspective. How can you claim you love me when your heart remains distant? Sounds less like calculated manipulation and more like valid grievance. If Samson genuinely cared for her, why conceal such essential information? Why sustain obstacles that prevented authentic closeness? The financial compensation becomes more complicated too. 5,500 pieces of silver embodied life-altering prosperity, but simultaneously tremendous peril. Betraying someone of Samson's standing meant creating formidable adversaries. The compensation needed sufficient magnitude to warrant the hazard. Her cost reflected her worth as an operative, not her desperation as a casualty. Certain feminist interpretations suggest Delilah authentically cared for Samson, but confronted impossible selections. Rescue the man she cherished, or rescue her population from his destructive campaigns. The scriptural text provides indications of authentic affection beneath the political maneuvering. Her persistence in questioning him might reflect desperate expectation that he would trust her entirely. The aftermath of her narrative discloses gendered configurations of historical recollection. Samson receives intricate treatment as imperfect champion, struggling with divine summons. Delilah receives reduction to one-dimensional temptress whose reasoning matters less than her function in male destiny. This disproportion reflects who controlled the narration process across millennia. Contemporary women authors reclaim Delilah by providing her complete humanity. Their narratives investigate her youth, her connections with family, her aspirations beyond the scriptural account. These narratives inquire what formed her into someone capable of such momentous betrayal. They decline to acknowledge her as born antagonist. The Me Too movement introduces fresh viewpoint to authority dynamics in the narrative. Samson possessed literal superhuman might. Physical menace lurked beneath every exchange, whether deliberate or not. Delilah's manipulation might represent the exclusive form of authority available to women confronting overwhelming masculine force. Her instruments were language and intelligence because those constituted her sole alternatives. Contemporary psychology provides additional comprehension into the connection. Samson exhibits classic narcissistic characteristics: grandiosity, requirement for appreciation, absence of compassion for others. His puzzles, his boasting, his casual brutality all indicate personality dysfunction. Delilah might have been managing an abusive companion whose appeal masked deeper malfunction. The religious framework becomes more intricate through feminist examination. Ancient Near Eastern cultures venerated powerful goddesses alongside male deities. Delilah might have fulfilled spiritual as well as political functions in opposing Samson. Her triumph could represent feminine divine authority, defeating masculine hostility. The scriptural authors committed to monotheism naturally suppressed this interpretation. Archaeological findings disclose women's genuine functions in ancient civilizations. Far from being powerless, they frequently controlled commercial networks, religious observances, and political negotiations. Delilah's evident autonomy aligns with historical actuality better than subsequent generalizations about female powerlessness and reliance. The hair-severing scene receives feminist reinterpretation as well. Instead of treacherous seduction, it transforms into intimate instance between lovers. Perhaps Samson fell unconscious peacefully because he finally trusted someone entirely. The betrayal inflicts more damage because it violated authentic emotional attachment, not merely physical susceptibility. Her disappearance from the account assumes fresh significance when examined through feminist perspective. Women's narratives frequently conclude when their utility to male accounts terminates, but Delilah's vanishing might represent successful departure from patriarchal oversight. She acquired the compensation and composed her personal conclusion beyond male supervision or assessment. Contemporary creators reconceptualize her visual depiction. Instead of exotic temptress in exposing garments, she materializes as competent specialist, completing challenging assignment. Her aesthetic appeal becomes instrument rather than essence. Her shrewdness propels the action instead of supernatural feminine attractions that eliminate independence from both personalities. The narrative's persistence partly originates from its uncomfortable realities about connections between men and women. Affection and authority interweave in intricate methods. Trust transforms into susceptibility. Closeness generates opportunity for both restoration and damage. These dynamics surpass historical eras and cultural divisions. Feminist theology inquires whether Delilah might have been pursuing divine summons too. If God employed her to accomplish Samson's closing assignment, then her betrayal fulfilled larger intention. This interpretation renders her an instrument of divine purpose rather than adversary of it. The moral terrain shifts when multiple personalities serve the identical ultimate authority. Marriage dynamics in the narrative reflect ancient configurations still identifiable today. Samson anticipated Delilah to acknowledge his mysteries while demanding complete transparency from her. He sustained emotional separation while anticipating physical closeness. These contradictory standards materialize throughout history in various manifestations. Contemporary therapeutic methods to trauma acknowledge that continuation sometimes demands behaviors that appear morally questionable. Delilah existed in constant peril from Samson's unpredictable brutality and from Philistine requirements for outcomes. Her selections might represent adaptive reactions to impossible situations rather than character imperfections. The narrative's reception history discloses more about each era's gender perspectives than about the original personalities. Medieval analysts emphasized female duplicity. Renaissance creators concentrated on erotic attraction. Victorian moralists cautioned against foreign allure. Each generation projected their personal anxieties onto ancient text. Contemporary feminist researchers advocate for interpreting Delilah's narrative alongside other scriptural women who employed manipulation for continuation. Tamar, Rahab, Esther, and Judith all utilized comparable tactics when confronted with patriarchal structures that provided limited alternatives. The configuration suggests continuation strategy rather than moral deficiency. The silver pieces themselves transform into symbols of female economic independence. Delilah negotiated her personal cost, managed her personal compensation, and presumably administered her personal financial future. These elements matter in cultures where women seldom managed significant assets. Her prosperity represented autonomy and authority. Her ethnic essence adds another dimension to feminist interpretation. As a Philistine woman, she confronted double marginalization in Hebrew narration tradition. Foreign and female, she embodied everything the scriptural authors wanted their audience to distrust. But contemporary readers can acknowledge these prejudices and interpret past them to discover more intricate character. The feminist recovery of Delilah's narrative doesn't demand rendering her pure champion instead of pure antagonist. It requests the identical intricacy granted to male scriptural personalities. She can be comprehensible without being blameless, understandable without being admirable, human without being flawless. Samson, as archetype, powerful men who collapse. He positions at the commencement of an extended succession of champions whose greatest might becomes their ultimate vulnerability. The powerful man undone by affection, by hubris, by the very gifts that rendered him legendary. Samson's narrative reverberates through literature, cinema, and human awareness because it encompasses something essential about authority and its cost. Achilles pursues the configuration centuries afterward in Homer's narration. Invincible combatant with one fatal susceptibility, his heel, but more accurately his fury. Like Samson, he possesses might beyond mortal boundaries. Like Samson, his emotions dominate him more than prudence directs him. Both champions perish young, their deaths more significant than their existences. The Greek dramatists comprehended this archetype flawlessly. Their champions perpetually carry the origins of their personal destruction. Heracles, mightiest of all mortals, perishes from wearing a poisoned garment provided by his spouse. The offering that annihilates him arrives through affection, trust, and domestic closeness, the identical forces that defeated Samson. Mythology across cultures repeats the subject. Celtic legends communicate of Cuchulainn, whose battle frenzy rendered him unstoppable, yet simultaneously uncontrollable. Norse narratives speak of berserkers, whose might in combat left them susceptible afterward. The configuration suggests something universal about human character and the burden of exceptional gifts. Medieval romance converted the archetype into narratives of knights undone by courtly affection. Lancelot's might serves Arthur's realm until his forbidden passion for Guinevere annihilates everything he vowed to safeguard. The mightier the knight, the more complete his collapse when affection conquers obligation. Shakespeare perfected the tragic champion, whose greatness encompasses the mechanism of his destruction. Othello's military brilliance cannot rescue him from jealousy. Macbeth's courage in combat transforms into ruthless ambition in governance. King Lear's royal authority blinds him to his daughter's authentic characters. Each mirrors Samson's configuration of might becoming vulnerability. The Romantic era embraced the archetype enthusiastically. Byron's champions possess dark magnetism that attracts affection and destruction equally. Their very intensity renders them irresistible to women and inevitable casualties of their personal passions. The Byronic champion owes clear obligation to scriptural Samson. Contemporary superheroes pursue the ancient configuration with remarkable consistency. Superman's might originates from alien heritage that simultaneously renders him susceptible to kryptonite. Spider-Man's abilities bring responsibility that costs him ordinary happiness. The X-Men confront persecution because of the very gifts that render them special. Authority perpetually carries cost. Film noir discovered ideal material in the powerful man annihilated by femme fatale. The investigator, the pugilist, the war veteran all possess might that attracts hazardous women who ultimately annihilate them. These motion pictures update Samson's narrative for urban audiences, exchanging ancient temples for obscure city streets. Westerns constructed their personal interpretation of the archetype. The gunfighter, whose standing for brutality renders him target for every young weapon seeker pursuing fame. Shane, the man with no designation, countless others. They all carry might that isolates them from ordinary existence and affection. Their gifts transform into curses in civilized civilization. Action champions of the contemporary era appear to escape the configuration by defeating their adversaries and winning the woman. But continuations disclose the reality. John McClane's heroics annihilate his marriage. James Bond's adventures prevent lasting connections. Even successful, powerful men compensate emotional costs for their physical triumphs. Sports culture produces real existence, examples of the archetype, athletes whose physical gifts elevate them to godlike position only to collapse through personal vulnerabilities. The mightier and more dominant they become, the farther they must collapse when human fragility finally claims them. The business realm constructs its personal interpretations. Corporate titans whose ruthless might constructs empires but annihilates families. Tech innovators whose brilliance transforms the reality while isolating them from human attachment. The configuration persists across different arenas of authority and accomplishment. Military history provides countless examples. Generals whose tactical brilliance secures battles, yet whose personal imperfections lose wars. Warriors whose courage in combat cannot rescue them from political intrigue domestically. Alexander the Great conquered the known reality, but perished young, potentially poisoned by those nearest to him. The configuration discloses something uncomfortable about human character. We admire might yet simultaneously resent it. We elevate champions, yet secretly anticipate their collapse. The mightier someone becomes, the more gratifying their eventual annihilation feels to those who cannot match their gifts. Psychological examination suggests why the archetype persists. Powerful individuals frequently develop in reaction to early trauma or loss. Their might functions as defense against further damage, yet simultaneously prevents the susceptibility necessary for authentic closeness. The very mechanism that generates their authority ultimately annihilates their happiness. Contemporary therapy acknowledges this configuration in many clients. High achievers whose success masks deep uncertainty, athletes whose physical capability compensates for emotional wounds, leaders whose public might conceals private vulnerability. The therapeutic objective becomes integrating might with susceptibility rather than selecting between them. The Samson archetype functions as caution and motivation simultaneously. It presents the peril of relying too heavily on any individual gift, regardless of how impressive. Yet it simultaneously celebrates the willingness to employ one's might for others, even at personal cost. The champion's collapse becomes significant when it fulfills larger intention. Contemporary narration continues, discovering fresh methods to investigate the archetype. Anti-champions whose might originates from moral compromise. Vigilantes whose justice depends on brutality they claim to oppose. Super-antagonists whose authority stems from the identical source as their eventual defeat. The variations are endless, yet the configuration remains constant. The narrative resonates because everyone possesses some might that could transform into vulnerability under the appropriate situations. Shrewdness becomes presumption, compassion becomes manipulation, autonomy becomes isolation. We perceive ourselves in these collapsed champions, acknowledging our personal potential for self-annihilation. Samson's legacy exists not merely in his individual narrative, yet in the template he supplied for comprehending how might and vulnerability interweave in human experience. 3 millennia afterward, we continue communicating variations of his account because we continue struggling with the identical fundamental inquiries about authority, affection, trust, and the cost of exceptional gifts. Final contemplations. The woman, the titan, the collapse. In the conclusion, they are both enigmas wrapped in ancient language and endless interpretation. Samson, the man of impossible might who perished from his greatest vulnerability. Delilah, the woman whose designation became synonymous with betrayal, yet whose authentic reasoning remains concealed in historical obscurity. Their narrative refuses elementary resolutions because human character itself resists simplification. What did she contemplate in those closing instances before the shears contacted his hair? Was it triumph, relief, regret? The text provides no window into her heart at the essential instant. Perhaps that silence is the intention. Certain selections remain forever private, known exclusively to the one who executes them, and whatever gods or demons whisper in the obscurity. And what of him? Did some portion of Samson comprehend what was approaching? His willingness to finally disclose his mystery suggests either complete trust or unconscious longing for conclusion. Maybe the burden of being exceptional had expanded too heavy. Maybe death appeared preferable to continued isolation in his tower of might. Their connection challenges every elementary category we attempt to impose. Was it affection, control, mutual requirement disguised as passion? The narrative supplies evidence for all interpretations while confirming none entirely. Authentic connections seldom fit neat definitions, and theirs was authentic enough to reshape history. The silver pieces communicate their personal narrative about human reasoning. 5,500, enough to acquire freedom, security, autonomy. But was financial compensation genuinely her primary reasoning? Or did it merely render the betrayal possible by supplying practical justification for emotional necessity? We assess others' selections by their outcomes, while executing our personal based on limited information and uncertain expectations. Samson's closing supplication remains one of Scripture's most honest instances. No pretense about noble intention or divine assignment, just a broken man requesting enough might to perish meaningfully. His closing language carries more authentic conviction than all his earlier boasting about God's favor and special summons. The temple's destruction transforms into metaphor for how individual selections ripple outward beyond personal intention. Delilah attempted to resolve a local problem, yet altered the balance of authority across the entire territory. Samson intended to perish with dignity, yet concluded transforming the course of history. Neither could have predicted the complete ramifications of their conduct. Contemporary readers transport our personal baggage to their ancient narrative. We exist in times when trust appears scarce and betrayal feels commonplace, when might receives questioning and susceptibility becomes strategy, when affection and control interweave so entirely that distinguishing between them demands meticulous examination. Their narrative addresses contemporary anxieties about connections, authority, and authenticity. Nevertheless, something timeless persists beneath the cultural specifics, the fundamental human spectacle of trust provided and violated, the conflict between public might and private vulnerability, the manner intimate knowledge transforms into weapon in the inappropriate hands. These dynamics surpass historical eras because they flow from unchanging facets of human character. The narrative's persistence across 3 millennia suggests that we require accounts like this one. Accounts that investigate the darker corners of affection and faithfulness without supplying easy resolutions or comfortable conclusions. Narratives that acknowledge how virtuous individuals sometimes execute terrible actions for understandable purposes. Perhaps that's why both personalities continue fascinating us. They are neither pure champions nor elementary antagonists, yet recognizably human characters caught in situations exceeding their capacity to dominate. Their selections disclose character, while simultaneously reacting to forces beyond individual volition. They execute decisions we might execute while confronting ramifications we hope to avoid. The woman who defeated a titan accomplished so with shears and patience, not sword and might. Her triumph arrived through comprehension rather than force. She knew him sufficiently to discover his vulnerability and manipulate it effectively. Whether we assess her harshly or sympathetically, we cannot deny her competence. The Titan collapsed, not because his adversaries overpowered him, yet because he finally selected to trust entirely. His destruction demanded his cooperation. The mightiest man in history was defeated by his personal requirement for authentic closeness, even when it arrived from hazardous source. His humanity annihilated him more certainly than any adversary force. Their narrative poses uncomfortable inquiries about the character of affection and faithfulness. Can affection coexist with betrayal? Does comprehending someone's vulnerability generate obligation to safeguard them or opportunity to manipulate them? When does continuation justify conduct that causes others damage? The text supplies the situation, yet leaves the moral evaluation to individual readers. In the silence following the temple's collapse, we hear reverberations of every connection that concluded in betrayal, every trust that proved misplaced, every affection that transformed into weapon. Their narrative continues because our personal narratives continue. As long as humans struggle with authority and susceptibility, with affection and faithfulness, with the gap between public might and private vulnerability, we will discover significance in the account of Samson and Delilah. The woman's designation still carries weight following 3 millennia. We whisper it when cautioning against seductive perils. We invoke it when describing calculated betrayal. We recall her when trust proves costly. She accomplished a kind of immortality through her instance of decisive conduct. The Titan's legacy establishes equally persisting. His designation represents might undone by vulnerability, authority compromised by passion, divine gifts wasted through human fragility. We recall him when champions collapse, when the mighty stumble, when might alone establishes insufficient for existence's challenges. Together, they remind us that every connection encompasses the possibility of both salvation and annihilation, that knowing someone entirely grants authority that can restore or damage, that affection and betrayal frequently spring from the identical deep requirement for attachment and comprehension. Their ancient spectacle continues performing in contemporary hearts, one selection at a time.